Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea. You won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea. You're listening to Jams and Tea.
Everybody ready?
Is Tyler recording?
Do you want to do the whole Bring Me the Horizon bit again?
All right, awesome.
No, let's just go right into it. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today, this is our follow-up episode to last week. We have Tyler and I coming off the end of our special Eminem episode the other day. So, you know, we've been hard at work. And seeing as we don't have to introduce ourselves, we can just sort of go on and push forward into what we've been listening to. And then we're going to talk about our albums that we mentioned last week, which are Reunions by Jason Isbell and Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius. And we had a recent addition to this lineup in the form of the Backxwash album, God Has Nothing to Do with This, so leave him out of it. And also we mentioned at the beginning of the last podcast that every week we're going to be talking about a recommended album as well. And we were just kind of getting like adjusted to the format, which is why we didn't do a recommended album at the end of last week. So this week, the end of this episode, we will start doing the personal album recommendations. And then the week after this is when we will be talking about them after the current releases. So I guess we will go by our acronym order. And I have been listening to, of course, 3 albums in question. I've also been listening to some Bruce Springsteen because he had 2 notable albums have one of their yearly anniversaries in the past week, Darkness on the Edge of Town and Born in the USA. But I listened to The Wild, The Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle at recommendation of Tyler because I'd never heard it before. And now it's one of my favorite Springsteen albums, so I highly recommend that. I listened to Darkness on the Edge of Town, which has always been one of my favorites, and I listened to all of The River, which is also fantastic. I listened to The Season by Fishmans, also at Tyler's recommendations, an amazing 35-minute-long track that's a dream pop album, and it's quite good. Good shit. Highly enjoyed that. And I re-listened to There Existed an Addiction to Blood by Clipping, which is one of my favorite industrial hip-hop albums of the decade. And the most recent, Run the Jewels, in preparation for one of the weeks we're going to have later. And that's pretty much it in my turn. So, August, what about you?
Okay, I listened to, of course, the 3 recommended albums, but I also listened to Bruce Springsteen. I wonder where Jake got that idea from.
It's almost like we're in constant contact with each other.
Yeah.
About the same things.
Yeah, what we listen to the same music.
You listen to your own music?
There's if you guys like Bruce Springsteen, there's this great movie from a couple of years ago. You should definitely check it out because it wasn't at all bad.
Philadelphia, starring Tom Hanks.
Anyways.
Yeah, August.
Yeah, that's really all I've been listening to. Maybe a dash of At the Drive-In in there. Most
on brand.
Like their second one, In Casino Out. That one's
Great
real
album.
good.
So good.
It is a good one.
It's not even their best.
No.
It's like fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
I wish I could be cool enough to say that In Casino Out is my favorite At the Drive-In album.
Yeah, I'm basic. It's
Okay, we're both. I think
all.
all 3 of us rep a relationship of command.
But it's
Well,
close.
because at the same time, if you don't, you're kind of wrong.
I mean, at least it's not the new one.
What?
Talia.
What new one? What new one?
No, there is
There
no.
are
See,
3
I
At
haven't-
the Drive-In albums.
I
and
There
there
is
is
no
5
Spoon
Clash
Albums.
albums.
There are
I
3
haven't
Driving
heard
albums. There are
Inter
3
Alia.
Indiana Jones movies.
I haven't heard
Five
Inter
Clash
Alia,
albums.
but I've heard mixed things about it. Actually, it's not all. Some people seem to really like that record, so
It has good songs on it.
I'm
and that is
I'm
it.
going to give it a listen actually, and hopefully I end up bucking the trend and enjoying it.
Hey,
because-
maybe.
Speaking
Tyler
of
can play
the
devil's
concept.
advocate for disliked albums.
Because we
Speaking
are.
of the concept of things being heard, by our ears. Morgan,
yeah.
what have you listened to?
Besides the 3 albums that we have been assigned because this is homework.
Choose them.
Yeah. Lately I've been kind of like a small Miles Davis kick, mostly just the album Round About Midnight, because
That's a good one.
that is a very good one.
On that kind of blue shit.
And I have not heard enough of his albums because there are, I mean, like, just so many classics, like an unbelievable amount. So there's that.
I'm on a Davis kick as well, actually, just to expand the conversation on the artist briefly. I haven't really been listening to much in the last week, but I've been kind of going back through his whole discography gradually over the last month. And it's kind of remarkable how many classic records he has. Like, it feels like just about from that period in the late 50s to like the early 70s, it was almost like every single thing he released was a landmark in some way. And I think that's like just it's so difficult to like comprehend that from one guy.
I mean, it's just like this podcast.
Yeah, truly.
You know, it's easily one of the most impressive discographies in the history of popular music.
Yeah.
But besides that, I've also been listening to, going back to a lot of Between the Buried and Me records and just because we were discussing it in our group chat and trying to nail down which one I wanted to recommend for a later episode, which is mild spoiler, but who cares? Yeah, I've been going through a lot of their discography, and weirdly enough, I'm appreciating it now more than I did even when I first got into them, which, as Jake can testify, was a lot of appreciation.
Oh, he was fucking in love with it. The second he listened to Colors, he was just like, holy fucking shit, dude. And it was a Between Them Buried Me kick that, like, it was like when I first listened to Porcupine Tree and he first listened to Opeth or Devin Townsend, he just fucking dived into that shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those discographies, or I guess Colors rather, is one of those albums that makes you just immediately want to listen to everything they've ever done, which I have. Yeah, that's about it, aside from the albums that we're covering today.
All right. That brings us to...
Me! Hello.
Yeah.
I've had a pretty diverse week, to be honest. For understandable reasons, I'm listening to a lot of Public Enemy lately.
Yeah.
The thing is, what no one told me about Public Enemy, and this might just be because I grew up like a working class white kid, is that they are so much fun.
Oh yeah.
Like, when people talked about like rap of that era, it was always like, to quote Jason Isbell, be afraid, be very afraid. And then I started listening to it because I'd heard it in Do the Right Thing, which I watched well before all this took off, like 2 weeks before, serendipitously. And Fight the Powers in that movie, and I thought it sounded really cool. And I went on Spotify and I clicked like play me their most famous shit, and I loved all of it. It was all just so much fun. That's the thing I described it as. It's like angry, but it's fun. And then I started listening to Fear the Black Planet, which is an incredible album in my opinion.
Yay, more Porcupine Tree love! Love to see it.
It's a fear of the...
I think she said. Yeah, I think she said black, not blank. So
yeah, black.
I've made that.
The Porcupine Tree album title's a parody.
Like, I do like Porcupine Tree, but anyway, among the same genre, after I watched your Eminem video where you talked about Danny Brown, and he had, you mentioned he had an album called Atrocity Exhibition. Atrocity Exhibition is a book by J.G. Ballard, who's an author I love. So it's like, he wrote High Rise and Crash, and Empire of the Sun. So I was like, let's go check this out, and I fucking loved it.
Oh, Atrocity Exhibition's so good. I love when people first get to listen to that, and they're just like, holy fuck, what is this?
I think Danny Brown might be an insane person.
You think? I even listened to one of his records in full, and like, Jesus, dude, what are you on?
A lot. Yeah,
a lot of things. Energy to all his records.
I want to specifically highlight the song. I will listen to that then. But I want to specifically highlight the song "Ain't It Funny," which
Yes.
reminded me of Boogie by Brockhampton, but more insane.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
It's like Boogie by Brockhampton if it was covered by swans. Or like
Doesn't the music video for that, like, the music video was directed by somebody famous, wasn't it?
Jonah
Like,
Hill directed the music video.
That's right.
Oh wow!
Starring
I
Gus
also
Van
listened
Sant.
to wow. I also listened to Dogleg's Melee after we talked about it on the last.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've listened to it like 3 times, and I love it more every time. I love that it is clearly like a neo emo album, but let me just pick up my phone there. I love that it is a neo emo album, but it also feels like a grunge album. Like it's got that like rough energy.
It definitely has more roots
Emo.
in the punk sound than the emo sound, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is
It felt like yeah, absolutely. It reminded me much more of like that first wave of not Fugazi, but like the Get Up Kids, that kind of thing. And I also listened to I listened to New Strokes album, which I was surprised by how breezy that was. These were songs like Reptilla. I'm like, I have nothing to hold on to here. But like every song on the new Abnormal, I was like, this is breezy as fuck. I'm into it. It's like I can just chill and get into it. It's a good time. And listen to my first Joanna Newsom album in YS.
Oh, yes.
YS. Which is one of the most immaculately written beautiful lyrical albums ever. It reminded me a lot of not the stage show, but the album of Hades Town, which I already love. And I think they're both equal levels of amazing. So, and I listened to Close Up by Joy Division because the first song came up when I searched Atrocity Exhibition.
Yeah,
there you go.
Miracle spiritual.
The cool thing about Joanna Newsom, like one of the most amazing things about Joanna Newsom, who I think is a legitimate, strong, like top 3 contender in terms of best artists of the last 20 years, like in terms of just the way that like her music is so literate or her writing is so literate and poetic, and it just you don't get like anything like Joanna Newsom at all in the music scene. Like she's so unique and she's so singular. And like I love all her records, but as much as I love all her records, I would even say that like Yeast is like maybe not my least favorite, but like the one I always come back to is Have One on Me, which is her like mammoth triple album, and it has one of the most incredible kind of narrative arcs of any record that I've heard. It's actually novelistic. It's one of the few records that I think it would be fair and not an exaggeration to call novelistic.
Wow.
So yeah, I cannot recommend that album highly enough.
Okay. What's it called again, sorry?
It's called Have One on Me.
Have One on Me. Fantastic.
Yeah, it was the follow-up to Yes, I think. And yeah.
Oh, amazing.
She's one of those artists like Fiona Apple who comes out of the woodwork once or maybe twice every decade to drop a stone cold classic and then just disappears into her, little world to work on her art.
Oh, wow.
And that's, it's worked for both of them.
I'm going to come back to Fiona Apple later in the podcast.
Cool.
Because reasons we'll see. But
yeah,
I also just want to, I know I've talked a lot. I'm going to stop. I've tried to breeze through this. Of course, I've listened to the Mountain Goats this week because, of course, I have. Of course, I listened back through the whole of All Hell West Texas. That's my favorite album. But I also listened to a lot of songs from Beat the Champ, which I can't believe is like 4 albums ago now. It's the concept album they did about pro wrestling, which does not sound like it would be amazing, but it is.
It sounds like it'd be amazing from the Mountain Goats.
Yeah, like
that's a niche they'd cover.
The Legend of Xavier Guerrero, which is about Xavier Guerrero Sr. But it's not just about the wrestler, it's about how he saw professional wrestling as a sanctuary from his abusive father, which is amazing. There's a song called Heel Turn 2, which is like mind-blowingly, emotionally amazing. And there's a song called Unmasked with an exclamation point, which is great. There was a documentary that came out about a gay wrestler a few weeks back, came out on Mubi, and one of the lines from that really stuck with me was he was talking about how when pro wrestlers lose their masks in the ring, that can mark the end of their career. And knowing that, listening to Unmasked, and knowing it's like an allegory, it's amazing, stupendously good.
Wow. I've always kind of like overlooked that record. I haven't heard it, but I've always just assumed it was a lesser Mountain Goats record. So I'm looking forward to checking it out.
It's really good. It's not my favorite of theirs, but
Of course.
out of their like B tier albums, it's at the top.
Awesome.
All right then. So now
What's
we've
up?
covered what everybody has been listening.
Not
I believe.
quite. I haven't
We
spoken.
no, we haven't.
Oh yeah, Tyler.
I promise I'll
make it
keep it brief because
snappy,
I know we've been going a wee bit already. So I'll keep it real tight. So speaking of kind of just moving on, segueing sort of from that Mountain Goats Beat the Champ record. Speaking of concept records about kind of bizarre subject matter that you wouldn't necessarily expect the artist to be talking about at length. Yesterday I listened to Ziltoy the Omniscient by Devin Townsend.
Yeah.
Yes, I've only heard it once at this point, and it was only yesterday, so it's still very fresh in my mind. I haven't really kind of processed it yet. But what a fucking album that is. Like, it's just so ridiculous. It's off the wall. It's silly. It's like really like, and leans into that silliness as well. Like, either Devin or someone else does these really kind of like cartoony voices on it, and it's kind
That's
of like,
him. That's
it's
him.
kind of like if you hadn't kind of, if it was your first Devin record, I think that you would kind of be like, who the fuck is this guy and what the fuck is he doing? Like, this is
It is
terrible
he's
place
he
to
is an
start.
out there artist. Like,
Yeah.
he is the mad scientist of prog metal, and I think that is him at his most like Frank Zappa and like weird, just out there shit. So I'm glad you took a chance with that one, because that one's not an easy album to recommend with Devin.
Yeah, well, I've been doing his discog in chronological order, so having a real familiarity with his stuff, approaching this record made it so much more fun, because it was so cool to see the kind of typical, really kind of gorgeous and shiny metal aesthetic that he kind of does on every record applied to this really zany concept. Like, it just suited how, eccentric the music already is on the other records. It suited it really, really well. So I wanted to shout that record out. I have also been listening to actually not a terribly huge amount of music in the last week. One thing I have been doing is I've been going through the discography of Lady Gaga. Because she's an artist. Yeah, exactly. Because she's an artist that I'm kind of generally familiar with. Like, of course, I know all the hit singles and stuff, but I never actually listened to any of her records in full. And I wanted to, because I was quite excited for Chromatica. And I wanted to give that record a fair shake with her like discography in the rear view, basically. And it's just such a mixed discography. Like, I won't get into it now, but like it's fascinating the way that she kind of gently shape shifts her sound. But my only issue with her discog is that, like, as she kind of shifts her approach from record to record, it often comes off as kind of half-hearted.
It doesn't settle into a specific sound well.
Yeah, and that's a shame. But I do think that Chromatica is probably, if not her best, then at least one of her best records, because it's one of the most kind of aesthetically consistent and tight. And it's just like you're doing this Euro house influenced dance record, and that's all it is from start to finish. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed doing that. And I probably will never listen to Lady Gaga again for a long time, because I've completely saturated my Lady Gaga levels are
Tyler has progressed beyond the need for Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
you've like binged two collective artists' collective works this week.
Yeah, Eminem and Lady Gaga.
Kind
what
of
a
insane.
combo.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what a very also not on brand at all. Just because
exactly.
I can't imagine anyone here. I really just can't see being a big Lady Gaga fan, which is understandable, because she's a bit out there, but like not out there enough to like make that her identity. At least that's my problem. Like, everybody keeps saying that she's like this generation's Bowie, and I'm like, okay, I get that I'm biased, but no.
I think the thing that
she's
holds
not.
her back is that she's so, and this is my perception anyway, maybe it's not the reality of the situation, but with each record, she's so determined to be successful and like have hits. And
Yeah.
I think if she kind of tempered those expectations or that desire, then she could focus more on making it a kind of cohesive project.
Yeah.
But there's just always tracks on that kind of reek of formula on all her records, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what holds them back.
Yeah.
But she's a talented artist. I'm glad we have her.
On the Lady Gaga Bowie thing, I would say that to say that just because Lady Gaga is so pop driven makes her kind of not this generation's Bowie might be slightly not quite correct. Like David Bowie's songs were always really experimental, and he was at like the pushing edge of the technology and the orchestration. But he, especially at the beginning of his career, like he was out to make hit songs.
That's
absolutely.
And I would just say, Lady Gaga is clearly walking in the trail that Bowie blazed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Undeniably.
We have to see if she ends up having a career of constantly reinventing her genre before we can say she's our generation's Bowie.
Certainly.
See, yeah, it's that evaluation only really comes with time, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's like when the Billie Eilish album came out, I immediately heard she's just this generation's Bjork. It was like,
No, what the fuck are you talking about?
Weird, comparison to make.
Bjork is still making music, popular music.
Well, ignoring all that, one, Billie Eilish has one album. Two, what? I mean, it's baffling.
No, I mean that's ridiculous.
Oh my god.
Aesthetically, their sounds just they don't really line up.
I guess
very
Bjork
well.
has a few songs where it's like, she does that whole ASMR-esque thing where she's like
the whispery vocals
and
like
so
that I kind of get.
Vespertine-esque maybe, but it's still a real reach to
Yeah.
to them.
Billy's way more into like Bjork is on the most obtuse side of art pop, and then Billy is like on the furthest side of like alt pop. It's
It would be really
And then
barely...
Eminem is firmly in the middle of art rap.
Oh yeah, art rap. There has never been an art rap album.
That
ever.
will only make sense if you have listened to the Eminem episode.
Look out,
or if you know
Open
that
Mike Eagle.
one
Did you
tweet.
see what I'm doing? I'm subtly working in plugs to your Eminem podcast.
We're interweaving a universe, and in an attempt to interweave the universe further, I move that we go to Morgan, who is dressed appropriately for his function today on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
do it.
no.
Yeah, function boy, get working.
Function boy. That's perhaps the nicest thing anyone's ever called me.
Function boy is just Hawkeye. Let's be honest.
Does that even like?
He doesn't have a power. He's just there to do a job.
My
He
point
is
is
function boy.
My point is more, does he even function? But that's
Okay. I'll take it. I'll take it.
We don't need to fall down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So the first album we're covering today is Jason Isbell and the 400 Units Reunions. This is his fourth album under the Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit name, and like either a sixth or seventh in general, apart from the Drive-By Truckers. And so I've been a fan of his since Something More Than Free came out, a little bit after that maybe. But I've been pretty much a religious devotee at this point to his stuff, because I think he's just consistently one of the most incredible songwriters I've ever heard. And I mean, it's easy to lob the best songwriter of his generation label at him, but I don't feel it's unearned at all. Like, I don't feel like it's a stretch to say that. And there. I mean, if you don't know, he's sort of an Americana artist.
Yeah, I think he's kind of easy to relegate as well in the current sort of cultural landscape, where his particular style of songwriter-driven Americana is kind of like not especially kind of prevalent or prominent in the.
I mean, like his most famous song is about that, really, from the 400 label anyway. Where it's like The Last of My Kind, is that the name of it? I think it's kind of Yeah.
So he seems kind of destined to me to be one of those artists who, if there is no kind of cultural shift to the point where his style of music becomes relevant or popular, then he'll kind of be sort of underground a little bit. Or I mean, he does have a devoted following in certain circles in America. I guess,
mean,
but
he's won Grammys for whatever that
yeah,
counts.
exactly. So within
He's
that
a bit
kind
of a trailblazer in that respect. I think he's sort of the forerunner on like the alternative Americana sort of direction. He occupies the same space as people like Sturgill Simpson does, as Rustin Kelly does, as Chris Stapleton does, basically everybody from Kentucky and Tennessee, just all that little swath there of just like the singer-songwriter in the definite more like Americana sound. It's just a little bit like driven by like I think it's safe to say that his wave of Americana sounds the most interesting that it's sounded since like the only thing I can compare his sound to is the Highwaymen, which is an oft-forgotten collaboration between four of the most famous Americana songwriters ever. And they had like a weird kind of edge to their sound. Like if you listen to the title track on their first album, it's like this weirdly progressive song that has like all of these elements, and it shouldn't work, but it does. And I feel like that sound has been built upon by them and like capitalized on by like Rustin Kelly, who uses like way more electronic stuff. And Sturgill Simpson too, his last album had that like all over it.
And the Highwaymen.
Yes, the Highwaymen, which was an album from last year that was excellent.
Yes, it was. That Isbell actually played on.
Yes, he did, and his wife is in it. Yeah.
Yep. So do we just want to dive right into thoughts?
Yeah,
or?
I was going to say, Morgan, since you introed the record, maybe you want to talk about what your thoughts are on the record.
Thoughts on the album.
And how it kind of compares to the rest of his kind of stuff.
Well, if you know me, it isn't a surprise at all to hear me say that this is my favorite album of the year.
You said that last week.
By quite a yes, I did. By quite a significant margin. In comparison to his other albums, I honestly I feel like the Nashville Sound was sort of a watershed moment for his career, where he crossed over into more, I don't want to say mainstream, just because I don't think that's appropriate at all, but it's where the crossover appeal kind of started. And to be honest, out of a next record from him, I would expect him to just kind of double down on that sound.
Yeah.
But with Reunions, it's not like he's completely stepped away from that sound or anything.
No.
This is, I mean, make no mistake, this is an Americana record through and through. It just has a bit more diverse instrumentation and musical ideas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think at its core, that's why I like it so much. And it's probably my second favorite record of his behind Southeastern. But there's it's easy to compare his stuff to like Dire Straits and Tom Petty on Reunions, especially Dire Straits, because I mean he's using the Stratocaster on the clean tone, and it's a deliberate evocation of sort of the early Dire Straits era of stuff, and it's never a sound that I would have thought to put him with. Cause I just never would have made that connection myself, but I think it works spectacularly, like especially on like Running with Our Eyes Closed and Overseas, because those have a very clear like Dire Straits and Tom Petty influence, and even Be Afraid, for instance, but they are definitely his songs, like I don't think anyone else could have written them. And even the more typical stuff that you'd expect to see from him, like Dreamsicle or River, is just absurdly well done. Like I think those songs are more interesting than something like Last of My Kind or Tupelo from the last album, for instance. I just think they're more. I just think the songwriting is a step up from that, and that's another thing I want to point out is that the instrumentation across the board for this record is just a vast improvement, especially in the bass, because the bassist Jimbo Harton is like working overtime on some of these lines. Like the opening guitar parts to Be Afraid have different bass parts going during that and underneath it that are just, I mean, if you sit down and pay attention to it, it's really impressive.
Very layered. That was
Yeah.
what struck me about it too, honestly. On first listen, it was just like, as somebody who's like, I'm probably the second biggest Isbell devotee on here, just because of you and meeting you and you turning him on to me, and we've seen him live together before multiple times. And as someone who's followed his career from Something More Than Free till now, that was the biggest pleasant surprise of this album, was just how it sounded. I like how there are, like, on the song, my favorite song on the album is probably Only Children, which has this really ethereal ending to it with these, like, almost, like, whispered choral, like, intonations that are throughout it that build this atmosphere, and it's like really unlike anything he's ever done before, and, like, at least not that pronounced. And I found that super refreshing, and I was really glad to see that songwriting come through. Like, my favorite is actually of his is the Nashville Sound, just because I think it's like, it's a really fundamentals album where every song is, like, perfectly structured and, like, perfectly put together. But, like, if that album has a weakness, is that it doesn't really throw you for a loop. It doesn't really do anything that would surprise you going into a Jason Isbell record. But this one, on the other hand, is not the case. I think that he varies it up a little bit. I like you said something about the song River, which I talked with Saoirse briefly about this before the podcast, is that River, because I've just been listening to Bruce Springsteen, is a Bruce Springsteen song. Like, lyrically, like, it's exactly something that he would be singing. And he pulls it off so
when Jake
perfectly.
said this to me, I said that it musically really reminded me of Billy Joel as well. Sort of.
Yeah, there's like a Billy Joel,
kind of thing.
Bruce Springsteen, blue collar.
And even like the storytelling
to
on
it.
that song, that song, like, it seems to be a story about, like, murder and stuff, and so it's very kind of got a Nebraska feel to it in that sense.
Yeah, I said it was like basically a Nebraska song, but with the sound that was ironically more along the lines of the river.
Okay, I mean, that's interesting, because I've listened to the album like 3 times now, and at no point did I get, this is a song about murder from the river. It was always like, I took the river to be like a metaphor for something about life, or how you live your life, and I never took it that literal, if that makes sense.
Oh no, I mean, like, it just alludes to murder in the lyrics. Like, at the very end of the song, like, he blatantly mentions, that he's like a guy who's, you know, a rich man who's profiteered off of other people and, like, killed people to keep them quiet. He's
right,
like,
no, of course, no, that's fine. But I just, when you said the river was a song, like, about murder, I was like, excuse me?
It's closely intertwined with the themes,
I mean, it's not necessarily about murder.
No.
I just got confused. Ignore me.
Okay. Well, that's another thing I want to note, is that there's a sort of significant lyrical shift that I've noticed on this album, to where it's, I think Something More Than Free and the Nashville Sound and especially Southeastern, are all very personal records.
Yes.
Like, even though they tell stories through other people, through things that he hasn't necessarily experienced, I feel like there's a significant shift with reunions where he just becomes, like, it's more of the Bruce Springsteen Nebraska approach, where it's just stories about different people and how they're living their lives. Like, Overseas is about a couple who are divided by countries by an ocean, literally, and they can't always be together, and that's making things really hard for them. And it's just, there's obvious ways to interpret that as him speaking literally about his wife when she's on tour, or him when he's on tour. And so there's obviously taken from his real experiences, but I think at the core of the song, it's about something that's completely separate from him.
It's universal in that respect. I think that it does a good job of, he does cover through, like, it is like a Nebraska thing where he covers these different stories from different perspectives, but it never feels impersonal, which is the impressive thing, is that he's playing these characters and writing from these perspectives, and it never feels detached or dry. Like you can just tell that he inhabits these stories, like on Only Children and like Dreamsicle and Overseas, just all feel like these really definitive, strong tales. They're really cinematic in that way.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh, this is killing me.
Oh?
well,
Oh no.
This is
And now we have him, the lone voice of
genuinely-
dissent.
genuinely killing me because these are all elements I just could not get into with this album.
Elaborate.
I do not find, I just don't like the storytelling on this album much at all, because for me it feels like, and I wasn't surprised to learn Springsteen was like an influence on Isbell, because I think that's definitely pretty obvious from a lot of the songs and the way he writes. But as I mentioned earlier, when going back and listening to like Springsteen albums, like even like Nebraska, or I guess just even the one I spent the most time with this week, that being Born in the USA, especially on tracks like Be Afraid, I feel things that I really like, the things that I really love about the songs on this album are things that feel more Springsteen than they feel Isbell. Which
Okay.
It's so interesting you think this, because it's going to juxtapose beautifully with what I think.
Yeah, and
Really?
what I think as well.
Wow, interesting.
Personally, what I think now I don't quite love the record as much as Jake and Morgan do.
Yeah, Sam.
But
Yeah.
I think that
I don't.
one of the strengths.
Thanks, August.
One
I
of the
will
strengths-
interject very briefly and say that I do have some extending thoughts on the album that did dip a little bit for me, specifically.
Right.
Not much, but they did.
Well, one of the things that I like about the way that Isbell wears his influences is that it's never like, this isn't like a record that is consistently influenced directly by Springsteen. Like,
Yeah.
there are touches of that in some songs. There's like, for example, I think there's also touches of Dylan in some of these songs as well. Like
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah,
Running
can
with
I
Our
just
Eyes
read
Closed.
out very quick? Yeah, in my
Running with Our
general
Eyes Closed
notes.
has some very Dylan-esque lines in it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact
Yes, it
that
does.
you can kind of see that influence there, but it's not something that he digs into or relies on for the whole record. It's not something, the whole record doesn't feel like Isbell in a particular mode. There's a lot of variation on the record in terms of the things that he's talking about and the style of storytelling that he's kind of adopting to talk about those things. Like some songs are incredibly, like almost entirely poetic in the approach, whereas other songs like Letting You Go are much more direct. They're just kind of telling you specifically about an experience that someone is having, or like about emotions that someone is dealing with through very direct imagery. So like, yeah, you can contrast Letting You Go with a song, for example, like River, which is much more, I guess, you could much more apply a kind of metaphorical lens to that song in terms of like various interpretations about what it might actually be about. And that kind of difference between directness and a kind of more poetic metaphorical mode is kind of all over this record as well. Like the directness is in songs like What Have I Done to Help? And what else? It Gets Easier is pretty directly like an addiction song. It doesn't kind of really dress that up that much. Whereas songs like Dreamsicle and Only Children, while they're still kind of storytelling songs, they're much less kind of grounded. They're much more kind of like ethereal and poetic. And they're kind of more about a theme than a specific story that's being told. And I like the way that that the storytelling and the lyricism is kind of varied across the record in that way.
Yeah, it's just for complete clarification, it wouldn't be accurate to say that this is a step away from personal songwriting, because it certainly isn't with songs like It Gets Easier and Letting You Go. Those are certainly very autobiographical, and
Only Children as well.
Yeah, Only Children is definitely at least based in some reality for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
My point was just more that the songs that are stories are very noticeably more not from his perspective than something on the last
The
few
distinction's
records.
well made.
Yeah.
No. And something I'd just like to mention as a point of fairness, I do think that those personal songs you mentioned, specifically the ones on the back half, like It Gets Easier and Letting You Go, I think those are, without a doubt, what I believe to be like the best songs on the album, because I feel that's where Isbell, he feels like he's putting himself out there the most, and that's what I really like about his music, like when he does that. But for the most part, he just comes off as kind of disconnected. Is just, yeah, like I cannot get into the first song, What Have I Done to Help?
It's my least
That's
favorite track as
interesting.
well.
That's interesting to me because I see that as one of the most direct songs on the record. Because
No, I
it's
see
like
it
he's
too. I do
directly
too.
making
I think
reference
it's a
to like
direct
events
song.
in his life, like his first marriage and then kind of meeting Amanda and stuff, and like how his kind of life has shifted direct. And it's like you can't really apply that to other people. I mean, he's talking just vaguely enough for it to be kind of generalized, but it is clear the things he's referencing in the song are real life. But I mean, the whole sonic approach of that song is very different to the approach
I
of like
agree.
the second half of the record. So
I agree wholesale, but it's at the same time like on those previous two tracks, you have last two tracks, you have like direct allusions to his daughter and his addiction, where I feel like What Have I Done to Help could just be a song written by any like himbo rich country artist.
well, it's this kind of song you wouldn't typically see written by a rich country artist, because it's a song that's entirely about like acknowledging.
Jason Isbell.
I mean, to be frank with you, that's wildly inaccurate.
With the rich country,
just
with the rich,
factually.
with the rich country artist, their answer to the question, "What have I done to help?" is nothing, and it's fine.
Oh Lord, that was not the direction I expected that to go in.
No.
I will add on, August. I think the weakness of What Have I Done to Help really lies in two things: length and
It's
repetition.
length.
Yeah.
The song is too long, and the chorus repeats are just a bit too much for me, because whenever he's talking about something specific, the song's engaging, and then when he goes back to that little refrain, it's just kind of like, okay, can like, all right, pick up, let's get the record started, and then
I wish
everything
that song
else
was more of that, but like I think it's specifically that chorus which
He muted himself.
sorry, I think it's that chorus which I think particularly I find obnoxious now that I'm thinking about it, more than like, because the actual verses I can get with, but like the chorus of just prattling, "What have I done to help?" I can't get into.
Because Jason Isbell sounds like Eddie Vedder.
I think
Wholly derivative.
I think August is trying his best to mimic the voice, and granted,
What have I done to hell?
It's not easy to mimic. What have I done to hell? That was Bob Dylan.
I think the reason why the repetition in that song works kind of against it is like after a certain point, when you've heard that refrain like a half a dozen times, it starts to feel like, you know, when you're on Twitter and there's those people who are like constantly saying like, what can I do? Like, I want to, you know, drawing all the attention to themselves when they're like, trying to be. And I know that's not Isbell's intention. He's a really self-aware guy, and he has done a lot on Twitter and in his personal life and in his music to kind of, you know, support and boost up, you know, causes that deserve his, you know, backing and that. So he's a really good guy, but the song kind of works against that, because it starts to become like, yeah, we get it, Jason. Like you really care, and that's super cool. But you know, let's move on to something else. That's the only issue with the repetition of that song for me. I do like the song musically.
It's really like it's got a bit of a bite to it that some of the other songs don't have. It's like that, and to be perfectly honest, that was my only, like, that song was really my only issue with the record for a while. My biggest prevailing criticism of it now is that, like, it's not even necessarily any individual song's fault, is that I just really find myself vastly in a complete opposition to August here. I really find myself preferring the front half to the back half. I think that, like, Dreamsicle through River is like one of the best runs any album this year has had. And then Be Afraid kind of breaks it up for me. I don't know why that song doesn't, it kind of has similar energy to What Have I Done to Help. It's a bit better of a song. It's just not like, it feels, it does feel like the most disconnected from its conflict. It comes back with St. Peter's Autograph, I think, because I really like the way that song sounds. And then It Gets Easier is a decent song. And then Letting You Go, which is the closer, I think is a terrific closer. Like one of the better ones he's got, in fact. It's just that it falters just so very slightly, just enough to be a problem, but not enough for me to say it's like a significant Achilles heel weakness. It's just that I think when he's, throwing all of these songs kind of out there and like, he's sequenced them about as well as he could. It's just that there's going to be an inevitable dip because of the weaker tracks.
It feels like a record that was recorded quickly. I think there is a lot of energy to the first half that just isn't sustained in the second half. And that's
I'll agree to that.
Inherently a bad thing, but
No.
I think the record would have benefited from more sustaining that energy more, because it just establishes that energy is the character of the record so well in the first half that it feels
I think
like
Nashville Sound is really good at that. It maintains that energy consistently in a better way for me. Like there's never a point. Yeah,
I vastly prefer that record as well.
You and I are kind of in that camp.
Yeah, I do want to talk briefly about the record thematically though, because in listening to it, there's one kind of thematic reoccurrence in the record that I kind of picked up on, and that's that I don't know if this is I have listened to his previous records, but not as closely as I've listened to this one, but there seem to be repeated references in the lyrics in this record to ghosts. Specifically this really hit me when I was listening to St. Peter's Autograph, because that's just a song which is about basically consoling his wife about her friend dying by suicide, basically. And so there's references to ghosts on other tracks as well, like in the opening lines of Overseas, he says this used to be a ghost town, but even the ghosts got out.
Only Children, end of that song,
Only Children
has
as well.
references to ghosts.
There's a obviously a more explicit reference to ghosts there, and there's like a subtle spiritual theme that underlines the whole record as well. Like River is has a lot of references to like Christian, is a really kind of Christian song. Like it has like spirituality in that song. And so like I was just thinking about this theme and how it's kind of reoccurring, and then I was thinking about the title of the record, Reunions, and I'm sure that that title has a specific meaning. I'm not sure if Jason has explicitly talked about what it is, but for me, like it makes me think of like how these kind of songs are kind of about potentially being reunited with people that you've lost kind of when you pass away, sort of thing. Like,
reconciling with the past, I think, is the most prevailing thing.
Reconciling with things that you can't change, with things that were there that are now gone. Like,
absolutely.
Because the songs that are specifically about people dying, Only Children and St. Peter's Autograph, are like specifically also about kind of like wanting to have a chance to address those people again, to talk to those people again, to kind of be reunited with those people. And so I think that
communicate it through song.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was kind of a nice. Yeah, sorry, go.
So, but it's like, and then you get a song like "It Gets Easier," for example, where it's like literally like a version of the past that has happened, and then the chorus is and it especially like resonates with me as someone who struggles with similar issues that are addressed in that song, like mental health and addiction, where it's like it addresses the failures of the past and then reconciles it with an approach to the future that feels like a fresh acknowledgement.
Yes.
Like part of my feeling about that song is like, whilst I have heard that message 100 times in songs, he says it really, really well.
Yeah. And like the last song, Letting You Go, is obviously directly about kind of like being a father and watching your child grow up. But I mean, the way that kind of chorus in isolation, like the hard part is letting you go, that line in isolation kind of relates back to other elements of the record of about like
absolutely
lingering in your memories and thinking about people and times that have kind of long gone now, and realizing that you kind of have to move on from that, and kind of dealing with the difficulty of moving on from that.
I mean, that's another song where I've heard the sentiment 100 times, but he expresses it with such simplicity that it's really it feels honest in a way that like if God, Green Day of 4 years ago to write that song, it would be awful.
It would just be like Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Volume 18, Take 4, like.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
interesting that you all bring up, well, that specifically Tyler's brought up that a lot of this record is about reconciling with the past, because he's talked about specifically with It Gets Easier, it's the first time on any record that he's been able to directly address his addiction issues. Like it's finally, he's finally at the point of his life where he is ready to sort of acknowledge and let go of that part of himself, because he's not afraid that talking about it will bring it up again within him. And I think that's an interesting way to tie in with the rest of the record, with just reconciling with your past and living with ghosts. And that's one of the reasons why I love the record so much, is just that it's so
absolutely
consistent with its themes, which
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the weakest part on the record for me actually is It Gets Easier, which I think is a great written song, like lyrically.
It is. Yeah.
Just a very boring song.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I
It's-
100% agree. I will get onto it when I get more in depth about what I think, but I agree with you so hard.
I do too. That is the one of the only place where the album truly like stumbles for me.
Yeah,
it's captivated in like the step down halfway through every verse, because it's a tone of like a really fun song. It's like da 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 da, and it's just not the tone the song wants.
Like the chorus is good. The verses are just G, C, G, C.
It's not just
like,
G, C, but it's like it steps way down. That suggests like blues, you know.
Yeah, I just don't fully understand it. To address the problems that a lot of you all are having with What Have I Done to Help, I've been sitting on that song for quite some time. I think it was the third say. And when it first came out, I really did not vibe with it at all. But the more I've had a chance to listen to it, and especially within the context of the record itself, I think it's just a really strong mood piece. Like, I don't really pay attention to the lyrics of that song at all. What I pay attention to is the in-depth instrumentation and production specifically. That's another song where the bass really shines through on that album. Where
absolutely. In my notes for What Have I Done to Help, it says like the bass is amazing on it.
Yeah, like while the guitar is just playing one or two chords in the main progression of that song, the bass is like all but running up and down the fretboard. And I think the more that builds in the 6 minutes of that song, the stronger it becomes, because there's electric guitars added in, the drums get louder, the keys sort of raise everything up, and I think it's just a really interesting experiment in building up. And for the lyrics to that song, weirdly enough, for an Isbell song, I just don't really pay attention to. And I think honestly, that's maybe the only song I can say that about with him.
That's true. That's actually a good point. I do like it instrumentally speaking. It's got a great swell to it.
Yeah. I think the only low point for me on the album, which is barely a low point, is just It Gets Easier, just because the instrumentation is fairly bland. And that's really my only problem with it.
And it's sandwiched between two great songs.
Yeah, that's especially the problem with it. But I still won't skip that song. Like if
I wouldn't either.
If I'm listening to the album, it's not something I would skip.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's any skips on this album, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Saoirse, I'm curious for your perspective now, because I feel like you're holding back some interesting thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I want to say out the gate, I like this album. I like it less than when I first listened to it, I have to say. And it's because like I listened to it the first time, and then I listened to it the second time writing out notes. I've listened to it again since. And after the second one, I was like it's good. And I like it while it's here. But I genuinely don't think I'm going to come back to any of these songs in my later musical listening career, and I'm not sure why. I spent a long time thinking about it, and I just want to preface this by saying, like, when I was talking about my taste in the first episode, so one of the things I like is like young men in their 20s with acoustic guitars, and TBH, that's much more in the folk demographic than is sort of the country Americana demographic.
Yeah.
I do have an appreciation for it. Like a lot of my favorite folk artists borrow from Americana. But not even a but. I would say that most of my favorite songs in this is Jason doing the Americana thing, doing the thing he's always done. Stuff like Dreamsicle. I love that song. It's probably my favorite song on the album.
Dreamsicle's great.
Gorgeous song.
Yeah,
Especially in terms
but
of
like I've
production.
got on my list of influences here. And I want to preface this by saying, when I got to the end of it the first time, I was like, this feels like my mum playing me a mixtape of the songs she really liked when she was at my age. Because I get like, it's like Gordon Lightfoot, Joan Baez, Leonard Cohen, Dire Straits, Pink Floyd, Eric Clapton, and Bruce Springsteen are the big influences I got.
I could see all
When
those.
I mean, I hardcore love one Gordon Lightfoot song. It's the only one I've ever heard. It's called "Would You Read My Mind," and it's beautiful, and it's all through this album. But there are certain writers in like literature, in film, in music, where it's like you have to be really careful listening to them when you're a musician. And I can say this as a musician, where it's like you have to be really careful listening to them, because Kurt Vonnegut's one in the book, so is Stephen King, where it's like you have to be really careful reading them, because you will immediately start writing stories that feel like knockoffs of those authors.
Yeah.
And it's like I've never been a bit of an Eric Clapton fan, not that much. I've never really been a Bruce Springsteen fan, and I've tried a lot, and it's never really clicked with me. And Bruce Springsteen and Dire Straits and Pink Floyd and Eric Clapton are the artists where I hear songs in this. And it's interesting that Morgan said, like, it never, like, it always feels like Jason Isbell made them. But on songs like Running With Our Eyes Closed, It Gets Easier, Be Afraid specifically, I'm like, this is, I could not differentiate this from Springsteen songs I've heard. And there's Dire Straits as well. It just, a lot of it feels like really feels like Dire Straits. And it's like, my problem with Springsteen, in a way, comes down to something like the change down in It Gets Easier, or with Running With Our Eyes Closed. It's like a pretty good verse, but it goes straight into like really like one strum down on the guitar for the chorus, and it's at the beginning of each line, and it's like it creates a sense of air and a sense of space that I am less musically interested in than I am more intricate things. And that's probably why I like the folk stuff more, because I get more of that from that. And it's like, I hear a lot of the songs and I'm like, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Dire Straits ever, I like some of their stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of Eric Clapton or Bruce Springsteen, but I like some of their stuff. I love Pink Floyd. I would much rather be listening to those records right now. With the folk stuff, that's probably why I liked it, because I felt like it was a song that wasn't written by Gordon Lightfoot or Joan Baez or Leonard Cohen, but a song written by Jason Isbell. And I got his voice in it. I could hear it. And I was much more interested in that because it stimulated something new in my brain. And it's not like I haven't listened to Jason Isbell before. I have, and I like him. But those songs felt like I was hearing a voice that I could really buy into, instead of like sometimes like how Quentin Tarantino films feel, where it's like, here's a bunch of movies I like, watch them with me, you know?
Yeah. It's a good way
Does
to
that make
describe
sense?
that. No, I think that's fair enough. I think it's mainly because I see that criticism, and while it necessarily doesn't affect me, just because I probably take to his influences a little bit more closely than, say, you do, I think that maybe it's that, well, the real problem is that Isbell just has really good taste. And that leads him to making music that is, in fact, like a lot of other people, with very good taste. So if you're somebody who isn't like fully in love with Isbell's voice out of the gate, I feel like that could be a distraction for you.
Yeah. I just
That
wanna
being
say
said, it's why it
that-
probably didn't impact Morgan and I.
Sure. I just want to say there is not a single song on this record that isn't. Well, I think there's like one. There are a couple of hooks I think are a bit dodge, but mostly this is an immaculately written record from a lyrical point of view.
Yeah.
There are a couple of lines where I'm like, the rhyme misses, but then again, he says in the album, like, if you're telling the truth, it doesn't have to rhyme. You get it.
It's a good line.
And I'm like, I agree, but also,
like that noise you
a
just made.
song that opens with the hook. We were testing you and you failed, and I'm like, it's a good line on good music, but I don't feel them gel. I feel like there's something off here in the syncing, or there's something that's not quite working for me here. And that happened a couple of times, but mostly this is a record where every single song, I'm like, I'm loving this while it's here at every single second, but just afterwards I was left a bit cold, and that's kind of why I think that might have been.
Yeah,
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to elaborate further on the point that it always sounds like Isbell to me, is that I just meant that with the way that he sings these songs and the lyrics, that the voice that he writes the words in, those always sound like Isbell to me.
Yes.
With the instrumentation and musicality, I think those are, I could definitely see having a problem with, I just want to listen to what this is inspired by.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, I understand it through that lens too.
August, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this album?
Since you
I
are
think we
clearly
should- I think
the least hot on this.
we should wrap it
among
up
us.
soon, but I
Well,
want you to have a chance.
You
to
guys were mentioning Isbell's voice, not like in terms of like his singing itself, but more in terms of his like
artistic
lyricism.
Mhm.
But I think that's precisely my problem, is not like entirely with his lyricism, it's with just his actual voice. I can't stand listening to any song he writes.
Wow.
I hate his singing voice so much. It is the worst thing of all.
You have
time.
That's
absolutely no
probably more
taste.
of a you problem.
That's
No,
what I was
that's
gonna say.
definitely
Like,
a me
that's,
problem.
I was gonna
That's
say, I was
definitely
like,
a problem.
I don't know about this one, Chief.
No, that's a me
Because
problem.
to me, he sounds like every, like, not in a bad way, but he sounds like pretty much every Americana artist I've heard vocally.
No,
Like,
and
it's cut above. But
I think
No.
I think maybe Rustin Kelly is the only voice, like sound wise, that I think that sounds better than him in Americana right now.
no, I guess to expand on that lyrical thing, I guess I just tend to be more personally inclined to more like, I don't know, deeper voices on like country or Americana songs, and I just don't really enjoy his delivery.
His mid pitch is definitely a far cry from somebody like Springsteen. It's a lot closer to somebody like Dylan, and well, you know, Dylan was not exactly known for his immaculate singing voice.
No, yeah.
No, I think everything you're saying is completely fair and rational, because I mean it's just a
Rational.
perspective. But that said, you have absolutely no taste whatsoever, and you will not be invited to the next episode.
No, yeah. Goodbye.
August is banished.
No, and one more thing. In terms of the production of this album, I actually like it. I think I like the kind of more psychedelic direction this album takes. I think from the like the promotional art and music videos made it very clear that was kind of the tone and direction this album was taking.
Mhm.
And I actually rather appreciated that, which is why I think it's a cut better than like the other Jason Isbell album I've heard, which is
Something More Than Free.
Something More Than Free. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it.
Yeah. And
But-
as I've suggested before, I think if you were to latch onto any of his albums, it would be Nashville Sound, just because it has the most momentum. It's a bit more like, it's just a bit more in keeping with the kind of Americana that you like. Whereas when he sort of deviates from that, it seems that that's sort of where it falters for you.
No, yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
exactly it. Like I just don't have like just he doesn't capture me with like an urgency to his music, as Tyler has kind of made the complaint about some Strokes music. Like it just doesn't captivate me in a way where like Bruce Springsteen on like Nebraska does.
That's understandable.
Where it's just like, yeah. So I mean, a lot of my criticisms are really not about this album specifically. It's more just his artistry in general is kind of just a turnoff.
I think
for
that's
me.
that's a fair comparison to make. If you had to approach the album from your viewpoint, I think looking at it that way is like I can't understand it, but I can understand understanding it, I suppose, if I want to be a little weird about it.
It's interesting
Yeah,
that you're
exactly.
bringing up Nebraska as a huge influence on this, because as someone who hasn't really gotten into Springsteen yet, just by listening to individual songs, Nebraska is the album I get recommended all the time. It's like, this is
Oh
one
my
that's
God.
your speed.
It is most definitely your speed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
All right, so let's wrap this up, shall we? Because we've got to move on to two more records here.
Yeah, we need to do our 3 favorite songs and our least favorite song, and then our overall score.
Okay.
So, I guess I'll just go first and
James
say
and T.
my
Jay, go
James and
first.
T. My favorite song is Only Children, which is closely followed by Overseas, which is then also pretty closely followed by St. Peter's Autograph. My least favorite song is probably What Have I Done to Help, and I would award the album a very decent to strong 8.
Mhm.
So
that's August next.
August.
He muted.
Okay, so my
there it is.
my 3 favorite songs are It Gets Easier, Letting You Go, and It Gets Easier.
Thank you. Next.
And my least favorite song is I don't know, probably What Have I Done to Help? Maybe River, one of those two.
Disastrous.
I thought you were
Awful
just
take.
going to list the rest of the
Light
songs on the
5.
album.
Light 5.
that is a higher rating than I anticipated from you, August. So
Like,
I'm pleasantly
maybe
surprised.
a strong 4, but strong 4 to a light 5, leaning more towards the 5 category.
Let's call it like a
Let's give
4.6.
Let's give a hard number for the sake of our spreadsheet.
Yeah, let's just
Yeah, okay,
go
so
with
5. Let's say
Yeah,
just
5.
a 5.
Okay.
5.
Okay.
That means Morgan.
So, 3 favorite tracks are Overseas, Only Children, and either. This is difficult because I love all of
Choosing
these
your kids.
so much.
It's
Yeah.
hard.
Probably for number 3, I'll say Running with Our Eyes Closed.
Mhm.
Least fave, I only really have one, which is just It Gets Easier,
Easier,
for the
yeah.
fairly weak instrumentation. In terms of a rating, if we're going very hard numbers, like the hardest 9 possible.
You can do 0.5s, I think. We did 0.5s last week.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we did, yeah.
so you can
Okay,
give it
well,
We are
9.5
keeping
if
track
you
of all
want.
of our ratings just for the
Oh,
sake
if we're
of it.
doing 0.5s, then I will do a brief change to 4.5.
So
enough.
that comes-
Yeah, I know you did.
So a 9.5 then.
All right,
Go on,
sweet.
do it.
Saoirse.
mate. All right, my top 3 songs go in track order, which is helpful. It goes Dreamsicle, Only Children, and then Overseas.
Good choices.
Thank you. And my least favorite. I mean, there's some songs here I don't remember much about, so I'm not going to count them because I can't really judge them if I don't remember them. But I would say, What Have We Done to Help? To Help is probably my least favorite, and my rating is like a strong 6.
Word.
Cool. So my top 3 songs are Only Children, Dreamsicle, and Letting You Go. And my least favorite's probably It Gets Easier. For the same reasons as Morgan. It's a beautiful song lyrically. It's nice to get it's awesome to get that kind of candidness out of Jason, but just instrumentally it leaves a bit to be desired. And I would give it a 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Do you mind if I get just another drink before we go into the next album?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
let's actually
Everyone's scores. Let's see what our average rating is.
we can do our average and
we can
then we
edit
can
some of these parts out if you want.
yeah.
I need a break.
So it's
and we'll
an
be back.
8 and
Well, let's take a break then. We can edit the break out.
9.5 of
Continuance. Now we are back,
My chewing's not coming.
and we are going to move on to our what
My
now?
chewing's not coming out in like super loud or anything, is it?
I can't hear it.
No, you're fine.
No, you're good.
Bird.
But now we are going to move on to our next album, which is Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius, and we're going to have Tyler introduce this album.
Yes.
Bingo.
Okay, so Perfume Genius. This is Perfume Genius's 5th record. Set My Heart on Fire Immediately. So he's been releasing records since I think his debut came out in 2010. So he's kind of been he quickly became, I think, a figurehead in the kind of indie music world throughout the 2010s. Like every time from I think the time his second record came out, Put Your Back Into It. From that record onward, each Perfume Genius release within the kind of alternative rock or / indie world was an event. It was a moment. It was something that was anticipated. And the really thrilling thing about following Perfume Genius, I've been a fan since 2014, just before Too Bright came out. And the thrilling thing about following Perfume Genius from release to release is that each record has been better than the last, basically, with some exceptions. I think that Too Bright was not quite as great a record as Put Your Back Into It, but it was a notable step forward in terms of Mike's ambition, in terms of his stylistic variation. With that record, because the first two records, Learning and Put Your Back Into It, were very kind of stripped bare, lo-fi singer-songwriter albums that were recorded either on guitar or on piano with almost no accompaniment. Sometimes there would be some electronic embellishments occasionally on certain songs, but it was a very stripped down those were both very stripped down records where the lyricism, the songwriting were at the forefront. And with Too Bright in 2014, specifically with the lead single from that record, Queen, there was a distinct shift in Mike's sound. So the sound was more polished, more produced. There was more, his music had a higher budget and immediately noticeable. There is kind of like a more it's weird to kind of describe that shift, because like in terms of the songwriting and how the record like sounds, it's really not that much of a shift. It's just that the records are kind of more polished. The record's kind of more polished at that point, and there's kind of a bit more influence from like 80s pop and that kind of thing. It becomes less singer-songwriter, more kind of poppy. And then when 2017's No Shape came out, that was an even more kind of a larger kind of stylistic shift into a more kind of sweeping world of kind of like loud, explosive pop music, basically. And that was a kind of a turning point moment, I think, because that record was easily, in my opinion, the strongest work that Mike had released to that point. And it was kind of like a massive record. Some of the songs, I think the lead single Slip Away ended up being used in a bunch of different movies. So it brought a lot of attention to Mike.
Opening track was used in the trailer to last year's The Goldfinch.
Best
Fun
film.
fact.
And I believe
Best film, I mean.
Unfortunate.
I think the most memorable iteration of usage of Mike's music in a movie was, I remember specifically hearing Slip Away in Booksmart. Was it not Booksmart? Yeah, it might have been, it was either Booksmart or 8th Grade, one of those two movies that Slip Away was in. And it was like,
I want to say it was 8th grade.
Yeah, it might have been 8th
Sure.
grade. But anyway, like it was a sort of, with that record and with the kind of reception that record had, and with the lasting kind of effect that record has had, there were a lot of questions in terms of where could Mike go next? What would he do next? Would he be able to kind of continue the streak where each record is kind of building on the sound of the last one, except being larger and more kind of ambitious?
It was.
So there was a lot of anticipation ahead of this record, and honestly, the first two singles were Describe and On the Floor, and they were both immediate hits for me. Like they were both
Yeah,
incredibly.
I've also been anticipating this as well as you, Tyler, just because I was a big fan of No Shape. I haven't been following him for nearly as long as you have, but I'm I'm bad for not doing so. But I got to the singles too, and I was a big fan of them. Just because you would turn me on to him, I forgot that he was coming out with a new album, and thankfully you reminded me.
Yeah.
Okay, Mace. So may I get this out of the way right away?
Go for it. Go for
Oh
it.
God. Oh God.
The Strokes released a song called "At the Door." Fiona Apple releases a song called "Under the Table." Perfume Genius releases a song called "On the Floor." So I'm wondering what song is next in the preposition, the place in the house series.
This is going to become the Eddie Izzard sketch about learning French, where you just learn things that make no sense, and so you go to France and you say things like la souris est dans la table, which means some mouse is under the table. And that's all you can say when you go to France.
Please make one of your songs on one of your records. Please make it preposition the place in the house.
No, I will totally do that.
That's a whole concept album waiting to happen.
Oh my God. Just all full of that. That's...
So,
songs about
since
being
I'm
under or on things.
Yeah.
since I'm
Sounds
kind
like
of
a-
leading off the intro to this record, I'll kind of give my
I'm
general
sorry.
thoughts first.
Look, we have a good time recording if no one else has a good time watching.
Is this man okay?
Sorry. I've ruined this.
It's still not as bad as when I came crashing through Tyler's intro last episode with "Do you know Taika Waititi?"
Yeah, forever great film. How well my distaste for him has aged.
You were ahead of the curve, honestly.
Well,
By
no, I think
day.
Taika has always been ahead of the curve in terms of like disappointing me. So
I thought you were going to say just being bad.
anyway, look.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Tyler.
Because I actually have quite a bit to say about this record. I'll kick off first since Morgan kicked off the last one after his intro. So I think this is Mike's best record to date, comfortably actually. In fact, it's a record that is so good, it starts to make my opinions and perspectives on the previous records weaker and lower.
Yeah.
Simply by comparison. This is easily Mike's biggest sounding, most richly textured and layered record yet. And that's saying something because No Shape was an immaculately mixed record that had a lot going on. This somehow manages to sound even more massive while at the same time being a more introspective record topically and thematically than that one was. And I mean, like, actually, even though it's a little more introspective in terms of the way that it sounds and the kind of some of the things that Mike talks about thematically, it's actually not all that different from the last record, because like the last record there were a lot of tracks. In fact, this has kind of been a focus of Mike's and a lot of his lyricism is talking about the human form and like the limitations of the body and like this kind of desire to kind of transcend his form basically and like shed his skin.
So like some notes on a conditional form.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to take that in the tool.
They should have switched record titles, the 1975 and Perfume Genius.
Yeah, really.
That would have been a great title for this. But no, I do like this record's title. But yeah, as I was saying, that kind of theme of shedding your form basically, or like at least feeling the inadequacies of your form. That's what the title of the last record referred to. And it's basically all over this record as well. Songs like Without You, which is a song about experiencing a moment of clarity and a brief moment of kind of satisfaction with your form among like, it's kind of like an oasis in a life full of dissatisfaction. And there's lots of similar kind of songs that talk about that kind of thing, like there in the song Your Body Changes Everything, there's a focus on like body image and like the weight of existence, but specifically in that song he's kind of talking about his partner. so it's kind of like there's a lot of Mike's songs are about relationships specifically and about like how we kind of interact with each other physically. Obviously, Mike being a queer musician as well, a lot of the music is kind of directly about kind of queer sexuality and queer relationships. Like specifically the song "Just a Touch," which is
Jason.
about a Jason as well, yeah, and I mean like a bunch of songs on this record, but specifically the song "Just a Touch" really leaped out at me. It's a song about a queer relationship during wartime when gay love had to be like, in Mike's words, a brief kind of frantic explosion that it was sustained only by memory afterwards. And so that's a really, really gorgeous song. Like the bass on that song is really thick and rich and enveloping, and it has these gentle kind of strings that underline it, and that's a common feature of a lot of the tracks on the record. And his vocal performance on this song specifically is just stunning. Like,
oh my God,
his
yes.
voice is the anchor, as it so often is in the music, but especially here, he kind of elevates the track to these staggering heights through sheer melodic will, basically. He just pulls you along. It's spine tingling. And like, there's a beautiful, beautiful lyricism as well, incredibly poetic. He says, "Take my song in hiding and hum the melody." Like the way that the music itself kind of stands in as this metaphor for like some aspect of their relationship, or like the intimacy that they experience together. Like he's kind of transfusing that into the music. It's incredibly overwhelming. Like I have so many thoughts on different tracks here. They're going to sound so scattershot. So I will I'll leave it at there for now, and I'll come back to some of my thoughts on other tracks as they kind of get mentioned. But yeah, what are some of your guys' thoughts on the record?
I honestly, like, I'll piggyback off of that just because my thoughts are not different at all. I loved No Shape when it came out just because it's got like, it's such a unique sound, but it has that immediate pop appeal to it, and it had sort of like almost like a lo-fi edge to it that just really made his music sound unique. And I feel like this album takes that and builds upon it. And like, I think this is one of the most immaculately produced, like, not even of this year, just one of the most immaculately produced albums I've ever heard. Considering the instrumental variation from track to track, I think that's doubly impressive. How every song is structured uniquely, sounds like it has its own full identity. I don't think a single song on here sounds like another song on it. Every single track is 100% itself. It is so many musical ideas going on and does not manage to like overwhelm me or make me think like it's too much. Everything's really solid. I think like Without You, I think is like a perfect song. It's my favorite song on the album. It is like, it reminds me of something that would be on No Shape. And it's just got this immediate hook, and it just draws you in, and it just sounds great. And like I just listen to it on repeat over and over again. And I love the themes that you said of like trying to transcend like physical limitations and just exist as this like ethereal, pure, emotional being. And I like how a lot of the album translates that into dealing with heartbreak and dealing with separation. Like it's basically the first song, whole life, like out of the get-go, it's just, you know, half of my whole life is gone. It's like post breakup, and you you just feel this absence of somebody who used to be there in this life, and like you're trying to translate that. And I feel like his typical approach to wanting to be this sort of pure being and trying to filter that through his emotions has never come off stronger than on here, just because every song has this clear thematic poignancy of how he's dealing with heartbreak and loss and separation. And he does it with so many varying levels of intensity. He does it with like, whether he's trying to find solace in somebody else, like in Jason, or like where he's trying to, like Without You, where he's just sort of lamenting just the absence of somebody else and saying like what life is like post them leaving. And like the only real problem I have with the record is that it is so eclectic and each thing is so fully formed, is that it never feels super cohesive sonically. But I also think that's the album's greatest strength. It sounds like the album this reminds me of the most is my favorite Radiohead album, In Rainbows, in how it's like it just never truly adheres to one specific sound, and whereas every other album that would be a weakness, this is distinctly a strength. And I feel like every single song just, it really, really works. And I feel like the front half and back half, like I feel like the album's perfectly sequenced. The front half is just like all of these more like hard-hitting songs that immediately like lunge out at you, and I feel like the second half is these like slower, more compositionally dense tracks that are just like really enveloping and warm and just interesting to listen to. And they take so many risks, and for me, they almost always just absolutely run, like hit it out of the park and work for me completely. Like on the second track, Describe, like the entire second half of the song is just like weird, like Bon Iver ambience that you'd find on something like For Emma Forever Ago, and it works. It's so soothing to listen to, and I really, really like this album a lot.
Can I leap in? If that's okay.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah.
Because I disagree with quite a lot of what you've said so far. I like the album. I think it's good. I don't love it. This is another case of first time I listen, same Jason Isbell. First listen, I'm out. Kind of like I'm just bowled over by all of the choices. When your second track is Describe, it's like a lot of the choices like hit you in the face, and I get it's almost like a Gaspar Noé way, like kind of overwhelmed with it, and I'm just like bold choice after bold choice. And then the second time, I had less of a good time, and then the third time was like in between, and that's true Jason Isbell as well. And it's another case of like having to go back and find out why. And I looked up who the producer was on this album, and he has an interesting career. It's this man called Blake Mills. And he's worked with Sky Fiera, Fiona Apple, John Legend, on a Cynthia Erivo featuring cover of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. For some reason.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you say he's worked with a Guy Fieri?
No.
Sky.
Really?
She was Baby's mom in Baby Driver.
Yeah, that one. She did. She sang.
I love
the
how
kind of
that's
music
the
like Sunday
reference
morning.
point for Sky Career. I forget that she was in Baby Driver.
It's the most immediate one I can think of, not her album. I don't
completely forget she's in
remember it.
I love her.
Although, I just want to say, the most interesting credit he had to me was he produced Semper Femina for Laura Marling.
Really? That I did not know.
Which is interesting to me because that's the album. It's a second to last one, where she started to turn this really paying off in her last album of exploring, I mean, for Laura Marling, more luscious production. I mean, it's not this, but it's for her more decked out. Like in no other album would she have the strange oozing bass of something like Soothing, or these like slide guitars on Nothing Not Nearly, or even on the last album, like something like Hold Me Down is like way more decked out than anything she's ever written. But I think my real problem is that for me, it's either a case of like I'm feeling like the production is masking the amazing vocals I want to be hearing, or like the vocals aren't what I want them to be, the production's compensating. Because I went back and listened to the second album, the last one, that was not a problem for me at all. But I feel like the production is so busy and the vocals are so often distorted through post-production that I don't feel the punch at all, which is a big disappointment because I can hear that is the attraction. I can hear that's the attraction and I want to like it. Like on a song like Describe, which is this it starts out like this wonderful a lot of the songs feel like things will be big in the indie scene in the UK in 2010, like something like Without You reminding me of like Two Door Cinema Club, but with Describe it's like that kind of like big bluesy like they're playing the bass in such a way where you can play a bass guitar in a certain way where you just hear yeah, you hear the punch of the bass and nothing else, and that's in the mixing as well. But and then like there's like, is it a harpsichord? There's something coming in, and then there's another thing, and then there's another thing, and it's like in the background and only for a second, and I'm like, what? Who? Huh? Oh, I'm distracted from the song. Oh dear, what's going on? I'm not paying attention to the thing I'm meant to be paying attention to anymore.
I just want to jump in real quick and say that with specifically the track Describe, the way that the vocals are treated, the way that the bass is treated, the kind of thickness of the mix is intentional, and not only intentional, but like reflective of the subject matter of the song. The song is about wallowing in a depressive funk, basically.
No,
It's about
absolutely.
being in a,
That's totally true.
Yeah.
But it's not a problem for me that's isolated to that track, if that makes sense.
right.
It was just meant to be emblematic. In a way, On the Floor is probably my favorite song on the album. It's not. It's my second favorite song. My favorite song is Some Dream. But in a way, my favorite song is On the Floor because that's like the most unapologetic, fun pop song on the album. Where I was
Yeah, On the Floor is great. It's so catchy.
I think it's his best single that he's ever released, which is saying something.
Absolutely, but like, there was a song, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it reminded me a lot of like a Johnny Greenwood score.
Not a bad point of reference.
Thank you. And especially like, the Phantom Thread. And the vocals were like treated so heavily. I mean, they're treated, and I was like, I know from the producer's past work that, and from the artist's past work, that this is an artist's choice. He's like gone to the producer and he's like, this is what we're going for. And the producer's got, okay. And he's leaped into that world. And I respect that. And I love that they've made an album so unapologetic and so ambitious. I love how unapologetically queer it is.
It is refreshingly gay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the problem is for me that as a queer person, I have just never gotten on with the side of queer culture that's like, to represent my queerness, it is like, we're going to give you everything. Because as a queer person, I just want to be like my normal downbeat self without people coming up and telling me in order to be a queer person, I have to like wear like pink latex pants. And it's like, and I feel like it's coming out of a stereotype other people have made that the queer culture's taken on, and now it's just become another stereotype. And it's just something that grinds with me about queer culture as a member of queer culture. And maybe that's my problem. I'm not sure. Maybe I am projecting my own. I'm intellectualizing an answer that isn't there, and I'm projecting it onto the album. But there's something there that I'm missing, and I don't know what it is. And I'm trying to come up with all of these answers for it.
I'd
but
really
I'm still
like to say,
missing something.
On that note specifically, there's as another person belonging to this community, I really like it because I think he's so, especially just from a perspective of a non-binary person, I think that his desire to transcend form is what takes precedence above anything else. Right. I think that I feel like he's just being himself. I don't feel like he's trying to project, like, this album is so like forwardly emotional that it's never like that. I just feel like it might be some level of projection there, just because it never comes across as this is my identity. It's just this is me.
No, absolutely.
And his desire to do that in a way that transcends all limitations appealed to me very specifically, just because as someone who feels limited by these limitations.
I like the album. I like it. It's just there's something of, like, every song that, like, I won't say what I think about the Jason Isbell record, that in every song, even if I'm middling with that record, there is something in every song that is like, I can attach love to that in that song. I don't have that feeling about every song on this record, but I have it about a lot. And like, in no other record am I going to get a song as like just lovable as Some Dream with those amazing blues piano chords. It's just, it feels like I've just, like, the musical number at the end of a movie. And it's like, I've been through this emotional journey, and now we get to have a song and a dance. And
Yeah.
it's like,
I thought that
so
song
love it.
might. I thought that song might resonate with some of you actually, because it's. I think maybe
Yeah, I really
it
love
might
that
be
song.
the only song. It might not be the only one, but I think it's the most direct song on the record that's specifically about being an artist and like
Yeah.
about your relationship with your art, and like it's about like you put like whether your art, whether the stuff that you've dedicated your life to is actually gonna mean anything or going to add up to anything. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous song. One thing I want to say in terms of the record kind of being like a lot, for lack of a better word, is that I do think that it's a less massive record than like, it's a less like, in terms of like queer excess, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's less that than No Shape was. No Shape was a much kind of brighter, more busier, more kind of like in your face record, whereas this is a much
Flamboyant, I would describe it.
Yeah.
That's why I
Whereas
like
the
it
sonic
too. It just
palette
has that
here is-
identity.
The sonic palette here is still dense, but it's more introspective. It's more withdrawn.
Right.
Darker
I mean, you are
and
totally
darker.
correct. You are totally correct. I mean, I suppose maybe like, I just think the songwriting is tighter as like on
Right.
No Shape. So when it's really overproduced, it's like, it feels like it's a response to tight songwriting, where it's like,
Yeah.
whereas here it's like, I don't feel like the songwriting's as tight, so the heavy production feels more compensatory, if that makes sense.
Some of the songwriting on some of the tracks is certainly quite spare. Like there's not a lot of lyrics on certain songs, but
That's
I
not quite what
wanna-
I mean. Like, I just don't think it's like as it doesn't immediately get me in and keep me there in a way where it's like, if that makes sense. And that's not a bad thing. It's just when you have production that busy on a song that that doesn't immediately make me say I want to keep listening. It makes me feel like I'm trying to hold on to something. I'm trying to find something that I can love about this song, and all I can think about is the fact there's a fucking harpsichord in the background somewhere.
Yeah, I guess that's just a matter of taste, I suppose. For me, like repeat close listening to this record and revealed a lot of like tiny elements in the production, like details that I like just totally overlooked when I was passively listening to it. Like the song Moonbend, for example, the most kind of minimal track on the record. I kind of just glazed over it the first couple of times I listened to the record, but actually paying real close attention to it, there's so much going on in that track, especially
There's a
towards the end of
density
it.
that just makes this album so much fun to come back to for me.
Yeah, like there's a saxophone in that song, like really subtle, darkly low guttural saxophone in that song that I really like. There's double tracked vocals. This is the thing as well. I enjoy the fact that while there's a lot of vocal manipulation on this record, it's not used in the same way on every song, and sometimes there's none at all. Like on songs like which were the ones I mentioned, like Just a Touch and Nothing at All, where like it's much more kind of, and mostly those two songs particularly jump out, where it's kind of Mike's voice is much more kind of natural sounding and kind of beautiful crooning, versus songs like Leave and Describe, where there's a specific effects treated on the voices to complement what he's talking about. I like the way that there's a kind of variation in the way that that's used.
There's some clipping.
Yeah, does anybody else hear that?
No,
Yeah, I
I'm
hear
hearing that too. But anyway, I'm curious to hear what Morgan and August think of this record.
Yeah, I
We've
was
kind of
just
dominated-
going to say.
We've dominated the discussion so far, and I want to hear.
Yeah.
I've said my piece.
And
I'm
all
done.
three of us have prior experience with Perfume Genius, whereas
that's
I'm pretty sure Morgan and August have not.
Yeah, I don't.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
So, rock, paper, scissors for first.
No,
Why don't
I
you
don't
go
think
first,
that'll
August?
work out too well. So just August go first.
Okay. Anyways, this album, I really like what you guys have said so far in regards to the kind of thematic stuff on this album. But there is another theme that I personally really enjoyed hearing across various tracks. That being this kind of recurring theme of like self-sacrifice and how what's his name? What's the guy's real name? Mike, yes. How Mike has to balance that. Like he has to balance this life of being a musician and an artist juxtaposed to his life, like personally with his family. And it's interesting you guys think of songs like the first song as more like a breakup type thing, because I thought the half of his whole life he was referring to was more surrendering kind of his personal relationships with people.
Ooh, I
For
like
his
that.
artistic for like the furthering of his artistic prowess.
But I don't think the two of those are mutually exclusive.
No,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
definitely.
what
That
makes
is
me
the
like
thing.
that so much.
Yeah.
No,
God, you all are
you're
just so
absolutely
good at
correct.
talking about music. Like,
Ugh.
We should start a podcast.
Yeah, we should like.
Yeah, we should do a podcast. But yeah, I really connected with that kind of. That was at least how I read a lot of the thematic stuff on here, and of course, I think it's track the 11th song, "One More Try," which is also an expansion on that kind of theme of balancing personal life and artistry. It might be the 12th song.
Some Dream does that too. It has a little
Some
bit of that
Dream.
in it.
And
Thank you,
also
then.
Borrowed Light as well, the closer, which
Oh, you're right. That too.
I want to
That
point
too.
out because Mike has called this song the saddest song he's ever written, which is
No.
In many
written some
respects,
depressing
yes.
music, because it's a song that's basically about like, what if all the creativity I have, all of the stuff I dedicate my time to, what if it's all shit? You know, what if it all is nothing? What if it all will be gone when I'm dead? Like,
That's why I love that song so much. It's
It's
a
a
deeply relatable
beautifully-
thing if you've
it's-
ever made anything
Yeah.
before in your life.
yeah,
No, I just love how exposed he feels on this record.
Mm.
I really enjoy that part of it. So nice. I personally, as just like a musical preference, I kind of prefer the harsher, more shoegazy songs to a bit of the more dreamier side. And as we've mentioned, the production is a little eclectic, and it does work on some songs, doesn't work as well on others, in terms of just how wild and varied what he's going for is. And I almost hear a tiny bit of like My Bloody Valentine in some
Yeah.
of the harsher songs,
Describe,
which I thought that was
reminds me of
yes, exactly. And also what's that? I can't remember the names of the songs, but Nothing at All. That's the other one where I heard a good deal of the. And just let's see, just one final note. The song. Oh boy, now I gotta look. Your Body Changes Everything. This is not a serious note. I want to make that clear. But when he says, "I close my eyes," it don't sound like he's saying eyes.
Close my guys?
It sounds like he's saying, "I close my ass."
Saoirse.
Well,
Which, I mean,
On
that's
that note.
entirely my fault for hearing that. But I needed to bring it up.
No, I'm glad you did.
I'm not sure I am, but
On that note, Morgan.
Yeah, Morgan. You're the person I'm
Follow
most
that
curious
up.
to hear from. Oh God.
oh Christ,
Hope you don't have the corona.
I got the Rona. Too late.
Miss Rona coming in to kill the podcast.
Yeah, if August, if his thoughts are wrapped up,
Yeah, pretty much. I might
So-
touch on a couple of
I can close his ass. Okay, so I think it would be easier for me to start with the positives, not because they're less substantive than negatives, but just because they will take me less time to get through, because I think what's positive about one part of the album is positive with the other parts of the positive part of the album, if that made any sense.
That did.
It's
Just about.
it's just the parts of it that are good on every part of it.
and the parts of it that are bad vary a little bit more for me. So it probably is not surprising at all to find that I connected far more with the parts of this album that have really strong hooks.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
your body changes everything, and describe, and specifically Nothing at All, which is probably my song of the year thus far.
Good pick.
It's so good.
No, not.
It's just got such a solid groove to start out with, even if it's subtle, and then it goes through all of its changes so smoothly, and like the first time you listen to it, you have no idea where it's going to go, but when it gets there, you're like, that's exactly where I wanted it to go.
Yeah.
I'm glad. And I think a lot of that applies to the rest of the brighter spots on the album, like Some Dream and Whole Life, and especially On the Floor, which are all varying in instrumentation and ideas, but are good in the same way, I think. Like, I just think they're very uniformly strong in exploring all of the ideas that they want to get through. And as you all have said, I will double down on this is one of the most immaculately produced records of the year, if not ever. I mean, I think every instrumentation that it tries, it mostly succeeds with. Like just the sound of it, not necessarily how it all comes together, because that's mainly where I have issues. The sounds of them, when they're put together, it's so clearly so well thought out and deliberate, and none of it sounds sort of half-assed, which can be a problem, like, with the varying instrumentations on sort of expansive albums like this, like we may have talked about last week.
What could you be referring to, I gather?
Who could say? To get into the more negative aspects of, they're not super significant. I just don't think, like, I could use Moonbend as a microcosm of my problems, because I think that is a great song that should be like 2 minutes maximum. I think it just needs to get where it's going quicker and come together in a more meshing way, because when I first listened to it, it was easily my least favorite track on the album, but on subsequent listens, I sort of understood it more and was like, okay, I get where this is going and what it's trying to do, but it still just never really comes together for me. I just don't think, for a song that's 5 minutes long with this minimal instrumentation as that, even when it builds, it just needs to get to the part where it builds quicker. And I think it would just be much stronger if some of it was trimmed down. In terms of other problems, I like, for the least favorite tracks portion, I have written down Leave, Jason, and Just a Touch, which are all songs that you all have praised in all sorts of ways at this point. My problem with them is not anything specific. It's the fact that after 5 or 6 listens, I cannot make myself remember them. They just blend together far too well with the rest of the album for me to properly differentiate them.
That sounds like that's inevitable, I think, with me, or with albums like this with some people. Is just that when they shoot for the moon so many different times and so many different ways, and even if they're successful, it's just not all, like, by the law of averages, you're just not going to hit with everybody. So I feel like that's a really decent complaint to raise with it.
So my thing is just to interject real quickly. My thing is, like, with music for me, I listen to a lot of music, and even after I've heard a record a bunch of times, if I can't recall to mind how a particular track sounds, I don't necessarily like. That's not necessarily a negative about the song for me. It's more about kind of whether I can remember how a track made me feel, or whether I can remember, like, the effect, whether I can remember, like, at least the way that the track contributed to the record, I suppose.
I feel like we can use it similarly in that respect.
if I can't remember
I-
it specifically, the melody or whatever, then that's not necessarily as big a deal for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And like, because I can't remember a whole lot of Some Dream. Like, I can't recall certain melodies to mind, but it is still under my favorite tracks area. The problem with my least favorite tracks and not being able to remember them is because I don't remember having a feeling with them.
Yeah.
I just don't remember
Yeah, that's fair.
associating any of that.
I'm having the same
Yeah.
problem, to be honest.
And I think as uniformly great as the production is and how that production kind of lends itself to the album feeling consistent, I feel like the songs themselves, if the production were to be stripped back, would make for a really fractured album. Like, it's the production that really, excuse me, it's the production that really ties everything together here, I think.
Right.
And
But
if that were to change or be stripped back a bit, it would just be a little too scattershot
I
for its
agree.
own good.
See, I agree, but I don't
lends
see
itself
that as a
to me
weakness
being-
because like the production is the way that it is for a reason, like because
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't
That's
think he's
why I'm-
complaining. Yeah.
right.
No, it's just that's more of an observation and not a criticism.
Fair enough.
The criticisms, Jesus Christ, the criticisms in of themselves are just that none of these songs stand out the way that other songs do, just in comparison to how diverse the album is. So it's largely that is a positive, I think, because it makes, like, again, there's no tracks on here that I skip, but there's definitely quite a few tracks where I just kind of tune out, which I don't think, as someone who's listened to it 5 or 6 times, I don't think I can say it's an album that I wholeheartedly love if there's quite a few significant portions where my response is to stop kind of paying attention.
Right.
I think that's a fair assessment of your thoughts would be like, you don't have any skips on the record, but with some of the songs, you don't remember why you don't skip them.
Yeah, that'd definitely be true.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Like, one of my general notes here is that I feel like a lot of the songs were like unexceptional in a way. Like, every Jason Isbell song on that record was like, there's something in here that makes that song worth hearing. And I can't say that about this.
Yeah,
album.
I think it could definitely do with being trimmed down a bit, whether it's in individual songs or just cutting songs wholesale.
It's not a point about the album, but just for the record, Morgan, I think you'd probably really enjoy No Shade.
Yeah, I would.
Personally, I would recommend that to you, just if you're feeling like you might want to
Yeah,
try.
I mean, it's worth mentioning
that.
that this is my first Perfume Genius
Yes.
album, and I still
gonna
haven't
say-
listened to anything else of his.
I would say as well
No,
that I don't know if Saoirse's heard this or not, but I think that the Perfume Genius record I would recommend for her would be Put Your Back Into It. I think
Yeah.
that she would.
I have
really
not
like
heard that, but I
record.
will listen to it. Thank you.
Because it's very stripped back, it's much more direct songwriting, and it's less dressed up. It's just very kind of poignant, hard-hitting songs that I think you would enjoy. Even though it's quite a
Well,
quiet
what's that record called again? Sorry.
Put Your Back Into It.
Put your back into it. Very good. Thank you.
Cool.
Not to like push things along, but I do have to take a break here very shortly. So if maybe we could go.
Yeah, no,
and
I was going to
let's-
say,
let's
we should
wrap this up.
probably get into
Yeah.
ratings at this point because
Yeah.
I think we're all
Mhm.
pretty well wrapped up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah,
anyone has
say
any
that.
last minute oh, I gotta say this.
Yeah, I'm good.
I would just say, like, I want to qualify my opinion by saying that the music I listen to most is like very lo-fi folk punk,
Yes.
which I think is a good qualifier for my opinion on an album like this.
That is a very fair assessment there. I would, yeah. That's
So
fair.
it's getting a 2 from Saoirse.
All right. Well, let's go round then, Jake.
All right.
Let's
Top
go.
three
Why don't we
tracks.
go?
Yeah, my favorite 3 tracks are Without You, On the Floor, and Some Dream, which is not an easy thing just because I loved a lot of the songs on here. Like, I'd say a solid, maybe I don't love, like, I'm not entirely in love with a song like Moonbend, but I still like it. But that being said, my least favorite song is probably Moonbend. But I really loved it, and I'd give it a light 9 out of 10. It's definitely going to end up in my upper side
So
of
we're saying a
albums of
9
the year.
from Jake Paul.
Yeah, that's the one.
Never say that again.
I second
Okay.
that.
Okay, so this album, I definitely think I connect in terms of like opinion wise. I think I'm most in Morgan's camp with like the whole. There's definitely songs that are kind of faint and they're kind of throwaway. But that being said, songs I really loved were Nothing at All, at like probably my definitive favorite. Let's see. Yeah, Nothing at All, On the Floor, and probably Describe would be my favorite.
The one with
song.
the ambient track. August
Yeah.
likes it. What is that?
Okay, so least favorite is probably Leave. Just that's kind of a track where it's a bit too faint for me. But
It
overall,
also suffers between songs that are much better than it, to be fair.
Too. But overall, I think this is an album that's very much for me on like the cusps of being an album I really love, but it just falls a tad short. So I'd say like a 7 out of 10.
Finally, an album that August liked.
Wow.
We got there.
That's right. It took
stand.
me more than anyone else.
And now
I'm so proud of August for developing taste.
I know, right?
Oh my god. Okay,
That's something you
Mr.
can say
Notes
about
on
me.
a conditional form.
And now we shall wait about 5 more albums that we review until he likes another one.
All right, Morgan, you're up.
My thoughts are almost identical to August in that summary. My 3 favorites are Nothing at All, Your Body Changes Everything, and On the Floor. And my least favorites are Leave, Jason, and Just a Touch, just because I have trouble remembering them, and they just never really grab me while I'm listening to them. And Moonbend also falls into that category, but I came to appreciate it a little more on subsequent listens. Rating wise, probably also a 7, but like a light 7, decent 7. Yeah.
Oh boy, it's gonna be me giving the album its lowest rating again. We love to see it.
I did it last time, so it's fine.
Okay, that's chill. The thing I keep coming back to in my head is that I love Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra.
Just unrelated. That's just an
No,
unrelated.
that's like
Just
another
a note.
like throwing everything and the kitchen sink at a song, and I love it.
Wait, what did you
It's
say? At the kitchen sink?
It's throwing everything and the kitchen sink at a song.
Okay. Sorry.
It's a phrase. It's an idiom. And I love it. And whoa,
Not
no,
you.
guys, no.
Not you, August.
Okay, I know, but I didn't mean that.
It's okay.
So my number 1 is probably Some Dream, and then number 2 is On the Floor, and then my number 3 is either Jason or Without You. I can't decide. And then again, it's hard to choose the least favorite because I can't remember a lot of these songs. But the one I can't remember the most is Leave, I think.
What was your
And
rating?
it's a 5.5. 5.5.
Okay.
Ooh.
I just want to, before I jump into my ratings, I just want to come to the defense of Leave for a second because it's gotten a bit of a tiny, moderate dog pile here. I love that song for a lot of reasons. I promise I'll be really short on this. I like the way that it reminds me, the vocals remind me of Shoo Shoo, which is a band I really love and I hope we get to talk about sometime. I love the way that it kind of details a masochistic fantasy really vividly and poetically. There's like imagery of like turn the camera on, I'm begging like a dog, which calls back to a similar song on Put Your Back Into It actually, which has a lot of the same imagery. And I also like the way that begging like a dog line is undercut by a sample, a really ugly distorted sample of a distorted dog howling, and it just adds so much to the song. I love that detail so much. That's all I wanted to say, is I really like that song.
That sounds great. I wish I could remember it.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to defend it because we hadn't really talked about that song, and I really love it.
For sure.
Okay, so top
what
three
would you give
tracks.
sorry.
Really hard to pick my top three tracks. I will say On the Floor. On the Floor, Nothing at All, Borrowed Light. My top three. And my bottom. Actually, honestly, like some of you have said, the record has like could benefit from being trimmed or has a few like less essential songs. I really think there's only one track on the album that I think is maybe not essential. I think the record is every song on the record except for one is like perfectly positioned and needs to be there and adds to the theme of the record. The only one that doesn't is One More Try, which I think is a good song, but it just kind of it bridges two of the best ones on the record, and it's just doesn't really stand out for me in the same way as every other track does, even though Mike sounds great on it vocally, and it's really well written, as August touched on. But yeah, I adore this record. I said last week that Dog Legs Melee was my album of the year. I've since decided this is actually my album of the year now, currently. It's overtaken it. Just because I've listened to it at least half a dozen times now, and each time I'm still discovering something new that I love, which is so rare. I'm going to give the record a really emphatic, really strong 9.5.
All right, that means this is our highest average.
I'm just going to say that every album we're talking about today is someone's favorite album of the year so far.
That is true.
I gotta go.
Well,
hold on.
Segue.
Wait, so we're just going to end the call for 10 minutes? Or?
We can just hang around. We'll stop.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, I'm going to go and turn my phone off for a bit to give it some time to charge. I'll be back in like 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about Backwash's new album. God Has Nothing to Do with It. Leave him out of it. Nothing
Great
to do with
title.
this, leave him out of it.
Good title. Yeah.
Is just so amazing. Not just because the record has like religious themes and overtones, but that it's like about being like trans and sort of having mental health problems, which a lot of people attribute to God, which God has nothing to do with. But also the fact that it's so witchy. It's like God has nothing to do with this. It's such like it's like a triple statement where it's like, I mean, the last track is like a slightly different take on religion, but it's almost like the whole album's kind of like, one, religious institutions are fucked. 2, I reject your religion and substitute my own. And 3, what I'm going through is fuck all to do with God. Leave him out of it, which is so amazing.
Three-pronged statement to come at this with.
Absolutely.
As exemplified by the album cover.
Yes, absolutely.
Which has 3 prongs.
It's amazing. You know, it's amazing that like I'm really glad this came onto my radar, thankfully, because of Anthony Fantano's review of it. Thank God for that, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have even heard of this artist. And it's important that we mention Tyler and I are Twitter mutuals with Backxwash now, and she has said that she wanted to be sent this podcast. So it is very likely that she is going to be listening to this right now.
Yeah.
And just to throw this out there, my opinion on this album was formed before I talked to Backxwash on Twitter. It was like I had done it a couple days ago just because this album's really short and I was able to consume it very quickly. So my our interactions with her have no bearing on our opinion on the album. I haven't biased us. That being said, I think I'm just going to come out the gate and say I fucking loved this project a lot.
Absolutely. I just want to say, because you asked me to introduce this album.
Yes, that's. I just wanted to get the context out of the way.
Yeah, but no, I'm going to build off what you said. In the last week we did this. I said my favorite album of the year so far is Laura Marling's Song for a Daughter. My favorite album of last year was There Existed an Addiction to Blood by Clipping.
Yes.
this is now my favorite album of the year so far, unequivocally. I love it. I have no critiques of it except for like one song, and that's like a really weak criticism when I get to it. But if you want to know about Backxwash, this is her second full-length album. She is a trans, like, hip-hop music kind of lo-fi creator. I've listened to her last full-length record, some of the songs from it anyway. It is as musically proficient, but less of a unique vision, if that makes sense. Like, I love the songs from it, but this is like another league, you know. I fully believe that it has, not that it is, but it has the potential, once I have sat with it, to sit in the pantheon of trans albums with stuff like Transgender Dysphoria Blues, which, if you know me, you know how much that album means to me as a trans person.
Record too.
Just sorry,
Love
yeah,
it. It's a
but like
banger.
just to start at the back in a weird way. Like just start at the back in a weird way. The last song really addresses trans themes in a way that the rest of the album alluded to. If I was to go through quotes that resonates with how I feel, I would say all of the lyrics to that song. Just to give you some quote choices, you feel like you lost a son, but you gained a daughter. Yeah. You think I broke your heart? I think it's for survival. Go do what I don't. Go spend your life regretting.
That was the lyric that really jumped out at me.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I am a trans person. I consider myself a trans woman, but I have not really properly come out to my family. So a lot of these lines, like, you think you've lost a daughter, but really, and you think you've lost someone, but really got a daughter. It's like, this is how I feel without even talking to my family about it. And a lot of these songs are about losing family because of the trans thing, even if just alluded to. There are lines about
Black Sheep specifically is a song about that.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So there's a song where it's like, sorry, I haven't written Dad in so many words. And so it's alluding to this the whole way through. And in a way, I almost feel like the line, the whole black magic thing in this album, paralleling to the title, God Has Nothing to Do with Us, Leave Him Out of It. It's almost like at the heart of this, where it's like, being rejected by a mainstream religion and then finding your own, being rejected by your family and feeling proud and going ahead of your own beliefs. Because the last song is called Redemption, and it's about learning to forgive. And it's about, almost in a way, learning to forgive religion as an idea, learning to forgive the idea of Christianity, because there's this line in the spoken word bit at the end, and I can't remember exactly what it was. I think I have it written down somewhere, where it's just like turning page. The book goes into how to do it. This is to do with the forgiving, and then the final line of the whole album is, "What can you do when your feelings about it don't go away?"
Yeah, I really like that line too.
And it's almost like, and it's quoting this preaching monologue, and it feels like she's citing religion copying itself to, like, this is all about self-identification and finding your own journey. This is just like a instruction manual as to how you can do that. And I love the whole vibe of the album about breaking through trauma. Like the sample of Eraserhead is really important.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that she's quoting Eraserhead. She's quoting the lady from the Radiator in Eraserhead. Eraserhead's
singing
my favorite.
About how you want to kill yourself.
Well, it's not just that, right? But it's like, Eraserhead is my favorite David Lynch movie. And yes, the lady in the Radiator represents suicidal ideation, which is so prominent in this movie. But like, Eraserhead as a movie often gets talked about as a movie that's about the fear of
Yes.
peril, but it is much more broadly a movie about the fear of living.
Mhm.
It's a movie about someone who is thrust into adulthood before his time, and it's about his fears of having a life that he controls and can make decisions about, and how that is inherently anxiety-inducing. And that's a theme that's so prevalent in this album. I feel like the thing is that something about this album is like when I was listening to what Jake and Tyler did about Eminem, just going that in depth about it, I was like, I can't fucking do that. But when I heard this album, I was like, I can about this one. And there's so many things about it that I love. I love how experiential it is, how it delivers its themes in a visceral way. Like, you don't even really need to hear the lyrics to understand what it's telling you, but if you do, it enhances the record. I love the fact that Black Magic starts out with this really eerie piano, bass, and slide guitar thing, and that musical loop continues even as the chorus becomes the fucking darkest thing. And it's like a total change of tone, but the music is staying the same. I love the opening track so much. The Ozzy Osbourne sample,
Brilliant
metal
sample. Like,
as
what a
fuck.
way to open your record! Like, it just announces
Absolutely.
itself so just. In such a punchy way.
Absolutely. The note I have for the title track is something so harrowing has never been such a bop, because it is.
That's this album in a nutshell, really.
It's dark and it's sad and it's harrowing, but I just wanna like fucking break out dancing with that song, and I don't know why. And that's why the Eraserhead thing is important, because yes, Lady in the Radiator represents suicidal ideation, but she represents beauty in despair as well.
Yeah.
And that is riddled through the album, and in the same way as like the end song could be read as embracing defeat of your ideology, if the film is so inherently about the rejection of what you're given and taking what you want. And then the final song is like, actually religion is kind of about forgiveness and there's something to give me. The end of Eraserhead could be read as Henry kills himself because he embraces Lady in the Radiator, but it's also an inherently beautiful moment. In the same way as like the end of Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, almost like there is beauty in tragedy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love, but I'm talking about so intellectually, but the reason I love this album is how viscerally experiential it is.
I was gonna say that's the best part of this album is that it is 20 minutes long, and yet it feels just as dense as any full like length hip hop project I've listened to recently.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, exactly. This is so succinct and tight, and it has so much density from everything to the lyrics to the themes to the sound, and it's all 20 minutes long, and it's just such a fucking bop. Like when Black Magic starts, you're just like, I fuck with Black Magic. Yeah, you're into it.
Yeah.
It's such a great hook.
And it's like the Eraserhead sample always signals to me we're approaching the end of the album, because that's like leading into a more
slowing you.
Ethereal thing. And it's like whenever I arrive at that song, listening to this album, I'm like, oh my god, already? Like, I'm not ready to go. I
don't want to go.
Yeah, I love
That
Into
was
the
a
Void.
Doctor Who reference.
It is fucking.
Oh my god.
I love. Literally, my note for Into the Void is I relate to this song, first of all, even though it's fucking dark and horrible, and specifically about being a colored person in society, which I am not.
No, none of us are.
I still relate to the imagery and the depression, and as someone who is about to, in fact, I've been on the waiting list to transition genders with the NHS for a solid 3 years now, and it's about to end. Before the whole COVID thing happened, my first appointment was meant to be in August of this year.
Oh,
so it's
Christ.
Yeah. So when she's talking about feeling afraid of how people look at her, for how she dresses, by the way, Backwaters is a beautiful lady if you look at photos.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. But and also when it breaks into the void and it's like just out of the void, the word fuck emerges in It's
That's
just
one of
like
my favourite
I've
parts
never
of the
related
album.
to anything more. I've never related to anything
It's-
more than soldiers repeatedly shouting.
Oh
"Fuck."
yeah, it's so good.
No, I can't think of a part of a record in recent memory that has utilized a curse word so well.
Yeah,
Honestly,
it's,
like you feel like you would be desensitized after you hear. Like I listen to hip hop albums daily, so you think that this stuff wouldn't like phase me at all, and then I hear this and I'm just like, ooh, I gotta chill.
you get like some variation on the record in terms of like the hooks. Like on a track like Amen, the hook is a little bit more like intricate and detailed and like just lengthier. Whereas compared to Into the Void, where it's just like this really kind of succinct, like just a few words, and it's all you need. And it just it communicates so effectively the feeling of the song, the emotion underlying it, and like the great thing about that song as well is that she's really like the verses contrast with the hook really nicely, because on the verses she's got this really panicked, unhinged, just fiery delivery, like she's really going for it, and then the hook is like has the same kind of energy, but it's much more succinct, so it's kind of like a slap in the face. And I really love that about that track.
Her delivery and performances also just absolutely make this album. Like
Energy
she
is
can
insane.
spit fucking bars. It's nuts. She delivers the energy and intensity that like Killer Mike does on the new Run the Jewels album. It's incredible.
I have so many notes for songs where it's just the flow is incredible, the flow is incredible, the flow is incredible.
Oh, totally.
I would just like to say 3 quick things, and then I pretty much talked out my opinions. The electric guitars are contributed by a guitarist from a band called Black Dressers, that we're going to cover in a few weeks, who's also trans. Amazing electric guitars, especially on the second track. I think the song Adolescence is the only low point, and it's hardly a low point. It's just because all of the things I think are good about every song are good about Adolescence, but there's nothing elevating it to the level of the other songs. And then there's a song like Amen, which has this amazing vibe of like, I just want to say, I love the vibe of tortured religion in Amen, and I also love the fact she's shouting like, fuck the boomers, fuck the fascists. I can just get behind that.
Very timely.
I love the gospel interlude. It like gives me like heart palpitations before it comes back into the verse. All right, I'm done. Continue. Go ahead.
You were saying something?
Oh, it's just disembodied comments. I was just going to say about the only reason that Adolescence like doesn't work quite as well for me is that the When the Levee Breaks drum sample is really distracting. Like it's been used in so many different songs that it just kind of like it just takes me a bit to kind of settle into the song, because that's such a overused sample, I'll say it at this point. But like lyrically, the song is on point as well. Like it's quite a moving song about a relationship with a brother. It's really candid. Like all the best songs on the record are. I mean, Saoirse has described the power and just sheer visceral impact of this record far better than I ever could. I mean, I don't really have much to add. One song I want to shout out that I don't think has been mentioned yet, that is probably my favorite on the record in terms of how it sounds and just the way that it hits me, is Spells. I really love that song. The looped vocals on that song are really chilling and just kind of get in my head really easily. And the feature from the other core member of Black Dressers, Debbie McCallion, the vocals that she brings to that track are so good. Like they're so smooth but terrifying at the same time.
I love those.
Yeah, and obviously Backxwash just absolutely just murders the verse on that track as well. Just fantastic song. That whole track has this really unsettling feel. Whereas a lot of the album is kind of like just downright terrifying. Some of the tracks I like more are just more kind of unsettling than terrifying, and that one in particular stands out. The other big favorite I have is Into the Void, which we've already kind of talked about. Black Sheep has some really hard-hitting bars, talking about kind of confronting her family and her kind of outsider status that's been kind of imposed on her, and just kind of learning to kind of embrace that and kind of throw it back at people. That's such an effective and powerful track. I love that. I mean, pretty much everything else that I have to say positively about this record has kind of already been said, and I just want to underline and emphasize it. I do think it feels a little slight, like I do wish it were longer. It certainly packs a lot of meat onto its 20 minutes, but I do feel that it is a bit slight. I do wish that it had been like at least 10 minutes longer. That some of the tracks had kind of, thing is, like, personally for me, I would like for some of the tracks to be longer, but at the same time, there's so much visceral emotion in these songs. There's so much like impact to these songs that the brevity kind of also works to underline that. So I feel like maybe if the songs were longer, they would potentially lose a bit of that. It's just that I kind of want to spend more time in all of the sonic worlds that the tracks bring up, like the intro especially. But like, it's a very good record. It's really solid. I can't wait to see what she does next. I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was a pleasure to come back to it time and again, and like the other records we've discussed, to find new things in it each time.
Oh yeah.
I'm just so happy that there is now a record on this podcast I can abuse about.
That was this podcast's purpose, to finally give everyone a record that they really like.
Yeah. There's been a really fun arc to this episode alone.
For real. I mean, we always tend to have at least slightly varying opinions, but this is one I feel like the disparity still went to most of the benefit. And just to comment on the album, it's funny, Tyler, that you mentioned the songs were longer. Is that, like, I enjoy the album's brevity. I think that's probably one of my favorite things about it, just because I tend to really love these shorter projects that just, I don't know, something about them can stick with me in a way that others can't, where I just get to cycle through this really visceral, compact experience. It's the Kids See Ghost effect, where it's just like they just pile an entire like hour-long album's worth of creativity into 20 minutes, and I find like a really good novelty in that. But the thing is that when I listened to this, and then when I looked at her catalog, and I was just like, I've never been more like upset that someone didn't have like 1,000 albums on Sputnik, that I couldn't just be like, oh, I want to go through like all of these, because the density here is enough to keep me occupied, and I'm totally going to follow her. But like the thing that I like the most, I mean, it's pretty much a lot of what Saoirse said rings true, just as, you know, a gender nonconforming person, that a lot of that experience, I'm just kind of like the whole black sheep kind of thing, and, you know, being closeted, and, you know, just not wanting to live with regret and all that really rang true. But I also, there's just in recent years, there's been a resurgence in media that uses witches and witch iconography in fascinating ways, and I usually like love all of it. Like, one of my favorite movies is Kiki's Delivery Service. I am a witchy person. I like me some witches. And
witches.
There existed an addiction. Witches. There existed an addiction to blood was one of my favorite albums last year, and it's one of my favorite albums in general, like of the past decade. And this album takes a lot of that horrorcore sort of coat of paint and uses it to paint its own picture. And it's really distinct, and it's really personal in a way that some of those songs that like there existed an addiction to blood, it doesn't ring hollow, because it's like a lot of that album is about race relations. It's about the terror of being a black person in modern society, and how like it is basically a horror film. And this kind of takes that one step further, and like it exemplifies on that niche experience. And like it's such an earnest album. It's such a well-written album, well-structured album, and it's so thoughtful, but it sacrifices none of these things to just be like something I can just listen to casually and just like really enjoy for being very very impactful, very visceral. There's no level on which this album fails to impress me and that I fail to engage with it. It's just very, very fun, and I like the samples a lot. Like the Black Sabbath samples great, and I love the way that it continues that. Like the opening chorus the song play in is like the outro of the song comes, and it all flows together really nicely, and it's just really good. I will fall and trip over myself praising it, just like I did the Perfume Genius album, just because I really, really like it.
God, I agree with Jake and Tyler on a record.
Finally!
All right, let's go to Morgan and August.
Yes.
What
do you think?
Well, August is muted, so I suppose I'll go.
Yeah.
I will absolutely agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I think from a pure performance perspective, this is the most impressive record I've heard all year. Like consistently on a song by song basis, it's all just so passionate and fiery and never boring. And it's just completely enveloping. And I don't think it's unfair to compare this to There Existed an Addiction to Blood. I think it's taking definite notes from that record. But
Flipping in general, yeah.
it's like if you took all of the super intense songs off of that record and put it into a smaller, more compact form.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I wish this record was twice as long as it is.
Oh.
That is fair, though. I mean, like, that's the best complaint somebody can have with an album is that they just want more of it.
It's true.
Well, I think it really does damage the record, though, for me. Because the first time oh, Jesus, excuse me. The first time I listened to it, I was not aware that it had ended until the first track started playing again. And keep in mind that this recommendation came up fairly short notice.
Yeah, we only had like a couple of days to listen to this.
And
yeah, I just want to say, like, I had a whole week to listen to the Jason Isbell and Perfume Genius albums. I had like 3 days to listen to the Backxwash album. I've listened to the Backxwash album much more than either of the other two records.
Fair.
I mean, it's also shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that leans back into Morgan's complaint of it being like him wanting something a bit more substantive. Yes.
Yes, and it is worth noting that we only had a few days, so my opinion might be changed a little bit on this next week. But I'm having trouble saying that I love this album when it feels so sort of like it's the same way that you would have trouble loving someone who shows up at every single party for 20 minutes and then bounces.
Oh, but that's me. I do that.
Well, fuck you.
That is also me.
And outside of a party environment, it'd be like, oh, cool, it's that guy. Okay,
Right,
bye.
right.
I like you. Glad you're here. I wish you would stick around longer
Who are
to get to
you?
know you. But it's hard for me to latch onto just because it's not here for all that long, you know?
Mhm.
And I can certainly see that being the appeal. Like, I don't exactly know how to make this album longer and make it better. Like, I think if you added a whole lot more to it, it might significantly detract from what makes it great. But as of right now, I just wish there was a lot more because
Yeah, the
everything
thing is, there's
that is here is so good.
There's too many songs to think of it as an EP, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's the EP length. So I think the way that it would be improved for me would be not to add more songs, but to kind of flesh out a little bit some of the songs here.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but then, like,
it's-
like
see,
a
they would
lot of
lose
the
some of the-
early Against Me records are the same length.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean, that's a very
all
punk thing,
the
isn't it? Like,
Against
we'll
Me
just-
records are also super duper short. Like Transgender Dysphoria Blues is like what, 30 minutes long?
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
listening to
that's
Eternal
perfect length.
Cowboy the other day, and that's 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's those first two are really short. And you know,
Right.
it's funny that you brought that up, Saoirse. You mentioned the Against Me album, and I had a similar emotional experience because you know, I don't know if this is widely known, at least in the circles that I know, but Transgender Dysphoria Blues was the album that made me come out. I listened to that and for the first time, and it just like I was at work and I had to go somewhere to cry. And I feel like if I had listened to something like this in Stack, just because of
Absolutely.
how honest that is to that experience and just how it compacts so many feelings and emotions into that little span
Just on
of
the subject
time.
of its brevity, though, I'm about to make a really stupid comparison that I think will hold up once I
I
explain.
compared Eminem to Michael Haneke.
I
You're
remember
fine.
that. I remember that.
You're fine.
I see
The
this album
Shell
as almost
Haneke.
like the horrorcore version of.
It's
is
named
already
pronounced
horrible.
differently. Don't yell at
It-
me.
Michael Hanky.
Michael Hanky Panky.
Games. But anyway,
Miguel Sanchez.
I see the song almost. This album almost as like the horrorcore version of "Make 'Em Laugh" from "Singing in the Rain," where it's like that's a song all about like you give them what you give what they came for, and you leave them wanting more, so they come back.
Such a galaxy brain
And it's like,
comparison. I love it.
Make 'Em Laugh.
Yeah.
If Make 'Em Laugh is about comedy, this is about feeling like shit. So.
And I would say the difference there is that "Make 'Em Laugh" is a song, and this is an album.
Yeah. Okay, fair point.
Oh boy.
Well,
Okay. Oh wait, I haven't said anything about this.
No.
album.
nope.
Mr.
No.
Milius.
A real danger in leaving August to last.
Now,
Hello.
Saoirse, Tyler, Jake, I love how you all connect with this album on such a personal
But
level. That being said, I agree with everything Morgan said wholeheartedly. I feel this is a very cohesive album, but it doesn't feel like a comprehensive album, to put it into like a catchy phrase. I think this is, in my opinion, exemplified by the first track on here, because it's this really great building up. It really does, like, there's that Ozzy Osbourne sample, which is the intro and outro. And you've got this pretty solid verse in the middle. But then after the Ozzy Osbourne sample ends the second time, the song starts going through this, like, I think it was like either a piano or just some like electronic progression, and it starts to build upwards, starts to really go somewhere, and I'm like, I'm hyped, I'm into this, and then the song ends right there.
It works though,
thrown
because it's leading you up into
completely
Black
out of it.
Magic. Like,
Which
it's
is the
building you
hype
No,
up
shit.
into-
it does. It leads you up, but not in a way that
It's the
feels
pink
like
diamond of this
connected.
record, guys.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God, you're
Thank
right.
you.
No,
Thank you.
Ex-
it leads up in a way that
Except
I didn't feel.
Pink Diamond
connected.
is stupid, and this is great.
No, yeah. Despite that, this is still a pretty great song. I really liked the second track, but what I felt ultimately hindered this album more than anything was the fact that there were 2 interludes on here, neither of which I found really all that interesting, and they just kind of broke up the flow in a way I found very unsatisfactory. And the issue is this album is fantastic on like a single song basis of like, there's so much energy on an individual track, and there's so much this great juxtaposition between this negativity you're getting from the track's vibe and at the same time this kind of upbeat, I want to get up and dance feeling. That's all great, but in putting this out, all 10 songs on this album together, I just don't feel it comes together for me as one experience in a way that really satisfies me. And I would just want there to be like a 45-minute album where the songs feel a bit more developed.
That's fair.
I think so.
I'm beginning to
I-
become unnerved by the fact that I'm consistently
No.
going with August.
No,
I'm just
it's
saying,
weird.
like, it's not like the Jake thing from earlier where I understanding. It's like I fully
No,
Get
yeah,
it?
me too.
but it's like what I would say is my favorite book is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut.
That is my favorite book too.
What is that, like
Amazing.
120 pages?
Yeah,
Yeah.
super fucking short. It's really, really, really short. And I read it on a single plane ride from London to Vietnam. And it's my favorite book. And when someone asked me, like 2 years later, like, are you going to watch the movie? I was like, no, because
There's a
I have
movie?
read, yeah, I have
Yes.
I have read the book
How?
once. I've read the book once, and that was 2 years before you have asked me this question. And I have not read it again, and I never will. And I'll never watch the movie, but it will still and always be my favorite book, even though it's that short, because I read it and I was like, you made that short on purpose. The whole first chapter was not in the canon of the story, but it's there. It's
How would you
about
make
the
a movie out of that? I'm
No.
so
Here's the
confused.
thing. Here's what I'll say in response. With Slaughterhouse-5 also happening to be my favorite book,
Mhm.
I just tend to generally prefer books that are shorter because I tend to get really bored.
That's fair. But no, I just mean like I
Please
got
never
everything.
read anything
No,
I write
I've-
ever.
I like your
No,
books though, Jake. I
Yeah, but
like those.
what
Oh,
I
boy.
mean though is like it's not that Slaughterhouse-5 is short. It's that it's short, and I got everything I needed from, and that's part of why it's my favorite book.
But
Yeah,
on the same token, sorry.
on that subject though, like I just don't feel like this, like it's an easy point of comparison to compare this to Transgender Dysphoria Blues, but
Mhm.
I feel like that record has a much more defined arc,
That's fair. That's fair.
and I don't quite think that this record has that as well, even though the themes are still as consistent as
No, it's-
Sure.
Transgender
it's
What,
weird.
Dysphoria.
what I would
I
say
would
is
agree
that
with
I never said this album was as good as Transformer Blues.
No.
I said that if considering I've only just met it, if I have been in a long marriage with Transforia Blues, and this is like we've just had a blind date and it was really great, and we've like gone to see a movie together and we both loved it. We had the same taste in movies, and it's like I need the long marriage to see if it's up there.
Let's be
That's
honest.
a beautiful,
With this kind of
beautiful
album,
analogy.
you
you.
need to expand that analogy to be that like you're not the type of person who usually has sex on the first date, but it just happened to happen this time, and it was really good.
And if I were to continue with that analogy, this is like a blind date where we were both having a great time, and then someone calls her and she has to leave, and we never see each other again.
Morgan, I just do you know why that comparison hurts me as deeply as it does?
Maybe.
Because that was the entirety of my last relationship.
Oh, yeah.
It was literally every single time.
Well, I did leave out the part in the analogy where this album turns out to be a conniving, cheating bitch. So,
Morgan, I love you so much.
Oh,
I
I
just
love
want to
you
say
too.
that.
I love you too. I love you almost as much as I hate her.
Oh boy.
That's a best friend right there.
Yeah.
All right.
Morgan is my
That's
best.
how you
So-
do it. That's how you
For a
do it.
reason.
So that being said, do we have any more thoughts on this album, or are we ready to wrap
I
this
think
Ready
up?
to wrap it
I
up.
think we've nailed it. Let's give
Yeah.
our ratings.
Yeah.
You know, let's do it in reverse order.
Yeah, let's switch it up and do it in reverse.
Tyler,
okay.
you first.
So I'm being put on the spot. Okay, too
Yeah.
easy. So top 3 tracks are Spells, Into the Void, and Redemption. Least favorite track, I guess Adolescence, if I had to pick one. And I'll give this album 8 out of 10.
Right?
Oh, so that's me.
Nice.
If we're going
Saoirse.
first.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
you. That's why I did this in this order.
Oh, you're amazing. I love you. My favorite is Redemption. Is it called Redemption? The last track.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. And then it's like the title track and Into the Void probably. And my least favorite, it would be Adolescence. I would give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Oh boy.
Nice.
Morgan.
Okay, so for a rating, let's call it a 6.5.
6 point.
What are your favorite and least favorites?
For favorites, Spells definitely number one. I just think the hook on that song is so great.
It's a
And
fucking great hook.
Much in that same vein, Black Magic is my number 2 for almost the exact same reason. And for number 3, probably either the first track or Into the Void.
Right.
For also very similar reasons.
Yep. It's the hooky ass
And
album.
Yeah.
least.
I don't really have a least favorite because there's not enough on here.
I was
going to
say, this is like when Fantano gives an album like this a rating, and then it's like least favorite, NA.
Yeah.
All right, so my thing. I've pretty much gone pretty well in depth with my thoughts, so I'll just skip a summary. Favorite songs would be Black Magic, Into the Void, and Redemption. And my least favorite, I'm gonna give a tie to Hell and Heaven's Interlude, just for what they do to the flow of this album.
Disagree. It's not, I mean, I get it, but it ain't me.
That's
I
me
feel
too.
I feel that, Tyler. I feel that.
I will give this a solid 6 out of 10.
You're killing me here, boy. You're killing me.
That's good coming from August.
I was gonna say any positive score from August is a quite a glowing
That's like a
recommendation.
10 from everyone else.
Yeah.
And on that note, my 3 favorite songs on here are Spells, Black Magic, and Redemption.
Hey.
Least favorite, I guess Adolescence. Still think it's a good, solid song. That being said, my score for it would be a very a decent 9 out of 10.
All right. That makes this the highest scoring album with a 7.9 out of 10.
Right on. Yes.
Amazing. I would just say that, I would say Redemption on this album is better than Redemption by Frank Turner, and that's the highest praise coming from me.
Yeah, from you. That's that's a compliment and a fucking half.
Oh wait, we've got something.
Got something?
Jake, you have a recommendation for next
I do.
episode.
Now that the podcast is over, we can do the recommendation album that we'll be covering as our 3rd slot for next week. And I have decided to recommend, sort of piggybacking on one of the things Tyler talked about at the beginning of this episode. This is going to be an album by prolific prog metal artist Devin Townsend, who's one of my favorite, not just prog metal artists, he's one of my favorite musicians and just artists in general. He's maybe the most prolific voice in metal, period. He's got 60 albums to his name, and they're not like the Omar Rodriguez Lopez albums he puts out every 2 months because, he just throws some songs together. No, these are all fully expansive, produced by him, giant projects. And one of his side bands, is it just the Devin, what now? What did you say?
I don't know.
Bangers.
Bangers.
Yeah.
Bangers. That's okay. I couldn't. I was like,
mash.
what the fuck?
That's a good Radiohead song.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. And one of his projects, it's the Devin Townsend Project, Morgan, yeah?
Yeah.
It's one of his side bands, Devin Townsend Project, came out with an album called Addicted, which is this really, it's a prog metal album that isn't long-winded, so I figured that would be a perfect start. But this is my go-to recommendation for getting people into Devin's music. It's this really fast, it's really aggressive, very hooky prog metal album. It's not even in my the higher tier of Devin's stuff for me, but it's a perfect casual metal album listen. It's so consistently exciting and has no weak points. So I'm very curious because I always want to recommend Devin's stuff because he's a little bit lesser known in terms of wider metal circles. And I want to recommend it to everyone. And hopefully if you see this and you want to get into his music, you can take what we say at face value and see if you will enjoy it as well. So it's Addicted with an exclamation point as the album, and we'll be talking about that.
So it's
I just want to
find everyone.
Is what now?
Oh, before I just want to say about the segment, it might not come across from what I said at the beginning, but what I think what we're aiming for here is you will listen to these albums with us. That's why we're recommending it now. It's like a record club, we'll say go off, listen to this music, come back, and we'll all talk about it together.
And
so if you have any
on that note, what are we covering next week?
Record wise.
Yeah, we need to do that too.
All right, so next week we're going to be talking about Run the Jewels' new record, RTJ4. And
Wait a
black
minute.
dresses, peaceful as hell.
That's
Okay.
next to next week. We're
No,
doing
that's not
this
what we're doing.
week. Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemists, Alfredo,
Oh, sorry,
and Jeff
sorry.
Rosenstock's No Dreams. Spoilers
Sorry,
for week 4.
I skipped a week.
Wow.
My bad.
Well, it's
If-
okay.
If you guys at home have any thoughts on Devin Townsend's album Addicted, DM our Twitter account.
Yeah.
We'll read it out.
Social
We're all
media
here.
links. What are they?
Yes.
What's yours, Jake?
I'm still at Sabbath Sky. Everything is going to be in the description below. And we have official podcast or official Twitter account for the podcast now. And Tyler, what's the
Yes.
handle on that?
That is at JamsTPod. So that'll be in the description for this video as well.
Yes.
So just check that out and follow.
And
Can you
Tyler,
find-
you are at End of Reel and at Queer Denise.
That'll be down there as well.
And yeah, and August is at
I
Willie
am,
Weirdo Vivo.
I am at letterboxd.com.
Well, I know what I'm editing in your picture for this
Yeah.
episode to be now.
I don't even think that's their at.
No, it's just at letterboxd.
I'll just write letterbox.com in like Comic Sans font, and that'll be the picture.
Like 404 error.
Yeah.
Yeah, put the Gremlins 404. and
What
mention
are you
that
gonna
could be a
do?
thing.
What are you gonna do for this Backxwash segment where I haven't been on camera?
Probably just put up a silly picture of something. I don't know. What's
Of Ted Raimi.
No. What you should do
Ted
is
Raimi it is.
put up a
Specifically in
picture of
Spider-Man.
Put up cameos of Sam Raimi's cameo in Miller's Crossing for me.
Oh, that's
We
like a
just
good
forgot
Where he
about
just
that.
gets
That
lit
would-
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
Of
great.
course. So appropriate.
Morgan, where can we find you?
You can find me at @Morgan.
And
And
Sarah,
that's my Twitter.
You can find me at the Llama blogs. My handle is the Hips Llama. As we said in the last week, but I want to plug it again for good reason. I write film reviews for A Fistful of Film, which is a website I love working for. I do a column there about cult films. I just put out one that was a culmination of a lot of work about Alejandro Jodorowsky's graphic novels.
Yes.
Rest
an
back in
interesting
recent
thing to
weeks.
hear about recently.
Yeah, I've read 9 books in 2 weeks for that.
Damn.
And I got it out on time. So if you want to go read that, search as Cult Corner, please do.
And on that note, also, August has something to
Oh.
plug because his new video
Yes.
today was
It's so
uploaded,
good.
which
It's
is
so
a
good.
great video that because we do Zoom calls like this pretty regularly, and we one night we decided to watch the anime trash classic Elfen Lied, and in order to get some sort of
Closure?
some sort of closure, some sort of like absolution from an absolutely empty experience that was mostly miserable, August made an incredible analysis of it, breaking it down as to why
Yep.
it is just terrible. And I'm going to link that in
All
the
right,
description.
thank
It's very, very good.
Jake Morgan and Tyler
Yes,
do
we
cameo
do.
Yes,
video
you do.
points. I don't.
And also just, there's August, you've
Yes,
got music
in
coming
one
out in the near
week.
future as well.
I'm so
in 1
Oh,
week,
shit,
so we
that's
will
right.
be able
Glacier
to
Flower.
briefly touch on that when we record the
Like,
next
yeah.
episode.
We'll
We
do
should
And-
do like an official review where August has to shut up.
Yeah.
not even for my album, just any album.
Yeah, guys, we're going to talk about Mad Villainy today, and August can't fucking talk. I muted him, so we're just...
And you know I don't like that album.
Sorry.
What?
Was that hot of a take? I mean, holy shit.
I couldn't.
I feel
hear
like
you.
this is the point where the music would have come in over our dialogue.
No, yeah.
It might
the
be. I
episode.
mean, that's the best part about it. I think that's pretty much it in
No.
terms of things we got to cover.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. We're probably going to do a B-side. Well, just to reiterate this point because we got confused, we are covering Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemist next week, and Jeff Rosenstock's new album No Dream.
No dream.
Both very brief albums, so this will be nice and
And the Devin Townsend.
And the Devin
record
Townsend.
is
I'm
pretty
gonna
good.
come in and complain about the Jeff Rosenstock being too short.
You can
So
take
you're
more
gonna
hints. Yeah.
contradict this entire episode?
Yes, that exactly.
Nice.
And
I like it.
we're
Boss move.
also planning on doing a B-sides episode for the Mars Volta very soon. So
Yes.
expect that.
We're gonna have guest
within the next
speaker
week.
Beto O'Rourke on the podcast.
No, not anymore because what was it? They said he was denounced
Yes,
in the
that's right.
comatorium on Instagram.
They said that, and they endorsed Bernie, the Mad Lads. I love them.
Fucking Omar and Cedric, fucking
They are the
absolute
best.
kings.
I love 'em.
Absolute kings.
That's
I would, if I could do psychedelics with someone.
When-
it
and
would be
they
them.
would probably turn you down.
Yeah. They're like, did you listen to our first album at all?
Did you listen to D Last in the Comatorium?
Yeah, it's just like, daily, actually.
Why
When,
lie?
when are we planning on filming that episode?
I think we talked about next or this coming Tuesday?
Your
That
time,
should
yeah.
be good.
Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll
All
be
right.
doing that on Tuesday. That's 6 albums long. It definitely will not be the 4.5 hour long Titan of the 10
An
10
hour.
album long stretch. I mean, it felt like 10 hours. Tyler, I mean, come on. We
It
were
felt
there
like-
for
It
days.
felt like longer than 10 hours. It felt like listening to all the records again. Like it felt like that was just how I felt by the end of it, as if I had just been listening to them rather than just talking about them.
And, there's not enough vodka in the world to make that feel brief, unfortunately.
And like you at least had the benefit of being the evening over there, so you could
Yep.
whereas it was like fucking 11 in the morning and I'm talking about recovery for
See-
a fucking half an hour.
That's the thing, is that I listened to, because Encore destroyed me, and then I had to listen to Relapse and Recovery, and I just had to go into those two, and I know they were disliked. I listened to those albums at 9 o'clock in the morning. So just picture, if you will, me in my bed staring at my ceiling fan like I'm fucking Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now as Recovery is playing, and I'm like, this is the longest album I've ever heard in my life.
You just
Knock, knock,
start
the devil
punching a
in
mirror.
malevolent.
Right.
The doors start playing in the background, and then they shove me in the shower, and I do the that was what listening to the Eminem albums.
Okay, end of this episode is going to be a hard cut after that scream.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop the recording right now.
Oh.
Here we